Evening, everyone. Should we get started? Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, October 21st, 2021. Under item 1, call to order. Well, 1.1, welcome and a roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Dockler. Here. Weber. Mock. Kavami. Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, we're all here. Under discussion items, item 2.1, request for change in class alcoholic beverage license from Grand Forks Grill, DBA Wild Build Sports Saloon to Class 1, from Class 1 to Class 4. Ms. Dorstedt, good evening.
Sandy stated we have a request from Grand Forks Grill LLC, which does business as Wild Bill Sports Saloon, to change their class of alcohol beverage license from a Class 1 to a Class 4. They have currently held their Class 1. They've held a liquor license since 2012. Their request for a change to a Class 4, they've submitted the request. We've received this in finance. This will allow them to have family dining. They will have a designated bar area, which will be 21 and over, which will have gaming involved in that footprint. This does require City Council approval for the change in class, but there's no change in fee associated with this. So with that, we would just recommend moving this forward to City Council for approval.
Thank you. Didn't they just change from a 4 back to a 1 and now going back to a 4?
Yes, they had in
okay.
July.
Great.
And so,
Sounds good. So they have history as a Class 4 license
Yes.
holder. Anyone, Weigel moves approval. Second by Veen. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks. Item 2.2. Request change in class of alcoholic beverage license from Sin Bin from a Class 3 also to a Class 4. Ms. Dorset.
yes. Thank you, President, Sandy, members of the committee. So this one, yes, is from Sin Bin to change their class of license from a Class 3 to a Class 4. They do currently hold the Class 3, which is your beer and wine. Request to change this to a Class 4, which is your food and beverage. They currently, they have submitted the request. The establishment will remain 21 and over. City Council is required for this change in license. With this, they would be required to pay the incremental difference between the two classes for the issuance and prorate the annual fee, and the dollar amounts are listed, details in your staff report. So with this, we would ask you to move this forward for your approval upon payment of fee, and that would be our recommendation tonight to move forward to council.
Any questions or comments? Weigel moves approval. Second by Weber. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Dorstedt. Item 2.3, amend Grand Forks City Code Section 21-20 or 02152B relating to locations where licensed premises prohibited. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of working with North Dakota Museum of Art. They're going to be making a request in the future for an alcohol license. In working with them, we realized that Chapter 21 does not allow a UD district to have a liquor license. So in this case, we're first amending our code, and the way we're doing that is just removing the reference to B2, B3, B4, and just saying you have to be able to serve, have retail alcohol sales within the zoning district. So we're removing the specific reference to B2, B3, and B4. That's what's going on with this. In the future, you'll get a request from the Museum of Art.
Right, but this has nothing to do with the Museum of Art's request. This has everything to do with changing the premises. Moved by Weber, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Item 2.4, amendment to the purchasing policy. Ms. Dorstedt.
Yes, thank you. President Sandy, members of the committee. You should have attached with your staff report a purchasing policy that we've redlined with some recommended changes. We did have several city departments come to us, just ask for a review. This policy was originally adopted in 2011 and was last reviewed in 2017. In review, we wanted to update, and we looked at a couple factors, one being consistent with other cities in North Dakota and others for efficiency and ease of process. We would recommend the change. The main changes here are to update the threshold to be consistent with the approval of the authority level set for department heads to 50,000. We did look at those policies of similar cities, Fargo, Minot, Mandan, and what's not listed in there is also Bismarck, and they have the $50,000 threshold for sealed bids. Part of this change also would be between that 10,000 to 50,000. We'd still require written quotes, and between 5 and 10, minimum of 3 oral quotes, and those would still come through Todd and myself for approval. If you're over 50,000, of course, that's also coming forward to City Council for approval. With that, the bidding requirements, sealed bids over 50,000, if it's a bid is required, Todd and I would review those for approval to go out for bid, but then once it comes forward to approve the bid, that would come forward to council. Those are the changes. I believe I've summed up the main changes in the policy, but if you have any questions, I am here to answer those. The main point is also to look at those items, such as with the wastewater treatment plant. There's many items that are just timely for replacement. This is a 3 to 5 week process when we look at bids, and it's more for ease of operations.
Any comments or questions?
I'll move approval with the question.
Weigel moves approval. Is there a second? Second by Weber. Yes, Mr. Weigel?
Why 50,000? Why not 75,000? I think, like you mentioned, the water treatment plant and some of these things to be able to get parts in a timely manner. Are we too low at 50,000? I think we changed that when I got on the council to up to 50. But
Mr. Weigel, members of the committee, yes, we had changed it. I believe that was in 2017 was the last time we reviewed this and brought it up to 10. I believe federal is 100,000. When I did look at, like I said, Fargo, Bismarck, Mandan, they've set theirs at 50. But that would be, I guess, a policy decision of council if you chose to go higher than the 50.
sounds good.
I think personally, I like knowing what we're spending our money on, and so I like seeing, well, and now that I'm on all of the outgoing messages, I'm seeing everything that's going out for bid.
Yes.
I don't know if it's, I think that communication is good. I don't have a problem with the 50,000 limit, and I don't know, at some point you have to pick a number, right?
And President Sandy, members of the committee, if I may, so this, I wasn't addressing changing the current authority of department heads for 50,000. This would put it consistent with that to, sometimes there's confusion between what the authority level is and what you have to bid. This would address the sealed bid process at 50 to be consistent with already authorized department level authority of spending up to 50,000. So if you were to change the bid, anything still over 50,000 does go forward to City Council for approval.
If you don't have to do sealed bid, does this preclude us from having to do multiple bids? Or does this allow sole source purchasing for anything up to $50,000?
The sole source would be similar, and that's addressed in here as well. And it would give that authority to 50,000.
Right.
Otherwise come to council.
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that. I like us going out and getting bids on items. I also don't want to stifle it. And so if other people think that it's better to go up to 50, I'm okay with that. I just don't necessarily agree with it. But I'm going to support your motion is what I'm getting at, Mr. Weigel. I just want people to know that I'm begrudgingly supporting your change.
In conversations with department heads, the 50,000 seems to be a reasonable dollar amount that would make their process more efficient.
And Council President Sandy, we're not going to sole source everything up to 50,000.
No.
We're still going to do bids on it. It just gets us quicker. It would be, the only thing we've moved is we can sole source without coming to council up to that 50,000. So if we're replacing something at the water treatment plant that has to be that, we have to get approval through administration on that. So we'll still seek, quotes on, and that sort of thing. So we won't sole source everything that's less than 50.
Great. So ultimately, I guess what you're saying is this is providing the discretion that you need and the flexibility. Okay, I'm on board.
And I think a really good chart and matrix for you to know when and what you need to do, if you look at page 3 of the policy, it puts in a nice chart form of those different thresholds and what's required between the informal oral quotes to the written quotes to the sealed bids and what department level authority is.
Great. Yes, Mr. Veen?
Yeah, one question on the, you said in the report here, you can do oral quotes between 5 and 10,000.
Yes.
Do you not get written quotes if you can? How does that?
Well, what we have asked in this is to get oral quotes, and there's a form that's also attached with your purchase policy that we have the departments fill out and submit to finance. So they're documenting those calls, but it's not a formal written quote until you get to the $5,000, until you get to the 10,000 level, then we're asking for written quotes. But it's still documented and attached with the invoice.
Any other comments? Good discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, and if you have follow-up questions, please send me an email.
Thank you. Item 2.5, development agreement for TK Industrial Park re-subdivision. Mr. Grasser, big news out there in the new industrial park.
Yeah, well, this is actually over in the Wells area,
Yeah,
but
I would call that the new industrial park for Wells Concrete.
perfect. I won't argue that. That's a good lead-in. This is actually the development agreement for developing that area out there. The preliminary plat was actually approved by City Council at the last meeting. And just as a reminder, this is kind of the old Wells Concrete site out there. This area is more towards the easterly end. Essentially, we'll be extending 50th Street to the north, tie it into Demers Avenue, and then putting development lots along either side. So this is the actual development agreement that would go along with that. And if you looked at it this weekend, there were a couple of name changes and things that occurred here just recently this afternoon as we're trying to just get the names right here with the developer, and some minor items in there. The only thing I'll probably talk about here that's really of any kind of substance, it's not even a big deal, is the parent company here is Coast Materials, and of course they provide concrete products. And because of that, they would like to do, as part of the upfront money, they would like to do the paving themselves and pay for that and special assess the underground. A little bit different than what we normally see, but not really a big deal, I guess, as far as we're concerned. On the engineering side, we can handle it just fine. So under this agreement, we would be special assessing the underground components and accepting their paving as basically the upfront money. Then they would do the paving and lighting themselves. So
I guess it would make sense for a concrete company to want to put in the paving up front.
Kind of does.
Yeah, great. It is, this is great, a company not headquartered in Grand Forks making an investment into property in Grand Forks for redevelopment so that they can attract additional business. I think this is great for our community. Any other comments?
I'll move approval with questions.
Yes, Mr. Weber, and second by Dockler. Mr. Weber, yes, sir?
So, I mean, there's so many things to like about this. But I don't know that this is a parallel situation in any way, but we have previously put in usually above ground infrastructure that is going to be owned and maintained by a third party, and then it's come back to us. Do you have any concerns in this case?
If I can correct, if I gave the wrong impression, apologize. The street under the plat is going to be dedicated to the city of Grand Forks. So they're going to put in, we're going to build the underground to city specifications. We're going to own and maintain it. They will build the paving and lighting to city specifications. We'll review all that, and we will accept that then and own and maintain it. So it's just going to be like any other street basically in town. And this group has been just fantastic to work with. I'm really impressed with the group that we've had discussions with.
So even if ownership would change in the future or it would cease doing business, we'd be doing the same thing regardless of who the owner is or isn't? Yeah.
Correct. The ownership will be by the individual lots adjacent to the public street.
Very good. Thanks.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Item 2.6, bid award for Project 8074, 2021 flashing school beacons. Mr. Krenko, good evening.
Good evening, Council President Sandy and members of the committee. What you have before you is our bid award for the flashing school beacon project. This project is to update all of our signal cabinets at each of these beacon locations, so that way then they can flash at the appropriate times when school children are likely to be there instead of at the sometimes times when they're not there. This project will also include push buttons at each of these locations so that when they are not flashing, other individuals can use them in order to signal to drivers that there is a pedestrian in the way. And in addition to that, this is also going to connect into our fiber optic system so that our electricians out at Public Works can reprogram these remotely at Public Works. And that's kind of beneficial in case of emergency snow situations or storm situations for early release. We ended up receiving 3 bids on this project. The low bid was from PEC Solutions on the amount of $659,433.50. PEC Solutions was formerly known as Moorhead Electric, and they have done work here in the city before, so we have no issues with that. And this funding for this is coming out of Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is a DOT program that supplies 90% federal funding and a 10% local match to this. Our overall anticipated city share on this is including our anticipated engineering consulting fees is about $116,000 for a total project cost of $750,000. And with that, staff is recommending awarding the contract to PEC Solutions. Any necessary budget amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Krenko. Yes, Mr. Weber?
What's not to like? I'll move
Right.
approval.
I'd agree. Moved, second by Weigel. I do have one quick question. How do we, so we have somebody at Public Works that can reprogram this. What's the path of communication? Do we have that worked out with the school district? So when they have an early dismissal or when it's a holiday and school's not in, they get that information to our people at Public Works?
Are you talking for future or currently?
Whatever, for future, let's go with future. How's that sound?
Future, we'll still have to work that out, but we want to get these things installed first and operational.
Great, okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.7, Project 8295, federal funding requests for Regional Roads Program, Urban Roads Program, Urban Grant Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program, Transportation Alternatives Program, and Special Road Fund Program. Mr. Krenko, you provide this overview for us annually, correct?
That is correct.
Is anything exciting that's changed?
Same programs, the special road funds, that is one that we've done in the past. That's a 60/40. We haven't applied for that one in a while. It's for construction only. That one we are looking at doing a mill and overlay down on that Lincoln Drive lower loop. The other programs are fairly straightforward. If you have any particular questions on them, I'd be more than willing to answer them. The only other thing that I would probably say in there is on the urban roads program, we did add in a project, South 48th Street out in the industrial park as an illustrative project in case there is additional federal funding available. The road out there is getting into kind of rough shape, and if there is additional federal funding that becomes available, it might be able to be allocated for that. Otherwise, another alternative to that is we could potentially reprogram our North Columbia Road reconstruction project funding for that project. But beyond that, if there are any other questions on the programs, I'd be more than willing to answer for them.
Hey, Mr. V? This is informational only. So I approve as well, though. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Mr. Weber?
Yes, if you could talk about, do we still call it the TAP or just the alternative, largely bike infrastructure? If you could discuss that and changes to that.
Certainly. The TA program, it's gone by a number of terms in the past, including Transportation Enhancements, Transportation Alternative Program. This program is geared more towards bicycle facilities. However, it's also taken on some, I believe, kind of safe routes to school as well, and rehabilitation for historic areas, as well as some other scenic aspects. We've historically applied for shared use path projects under this, and this year we are reapplying for South 48th Street from 32nd Avenue to 22nd Avenue, out kind of in front of that business park area that we've established out there. And that's a 80-20 program, and that is a maximum of $290,000 federal contribution. That is for construction only, though. So city would be responsible for all the design engineering and the construction engineering associated with it.
I mean, there's so much to celebrate about what the feds have done for us in terms of our streets. We've also, with our sales tax improvement, stepped up. There's a tremendous improvement in the streets over the last few years. It's starting to look like we're actually maintaining our streets. It's wonderful out there. Bike infrastructure, it gets celebrated. It's generally less than about 0.5% of the overall spending that we do. This current plan, I'm guessing we're just looking to continue trying to fill in the blanks on the overall bike infrastructure. Is that correct?
That is correct, and you'll actually see in the chart that we have a few other bike path projects located in there, particularly in some of the developing areas. So we've got a couple of fill-in projects in years that we do not have federal funding associated.
And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the University Avenue corridor. Can you discuss anything there?
I am familiar with some past studies that we've done out there which led to the sharrows being installed. I believe there was also another study, I think from the Knight Foundation, that had some recommendations in there as well. At this point in time, I'm not aware of any other particular action at this point in time because of some concerns of what the last time we discussed bicycle accommodations on University Avenue and the discussions of on-street parking and potential removal of on-street parking or effective removal of on-street parking was a concern for residents, so we didn't pursue bike lanes out there, and that was one of the main reasons we installed sharrows.
Right, and I supported that decision, even though the biking community was not happy about it, but the fight with the parking along there, I didn't think that was a fight that could be won. However, we do have these changes coming to the underpass, the railroad underpass along Washington, and I've heard that we can't do anything there because the road would have to be lowered, or there's problems. You can't raise that up. But we can't raise the railroad bridge. Is there any way that this funding can be used to raise bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure? Because in a lot of ways, Washington still creates a moat for bicycles, pedestrians moving back and forth between the university and downtown, a transportation corridor we're seeking to enhance.
When it comes to building a new structure, it is likely that a new structure would exceed the federal funding allocation for the TA program because that has a maximum contribution of $290,000, and so the majority of that would likely end up falling onto city funding for that, including the design, engineering, and construction engineering. So you could potentially use TA funding for something like that. However, because of the limited funding available, it may not be worthwhile to pursue federal funding.
Very good, and I feel like I'm blindsiding you a little bit because that's not what we're discussing here tonight, but thanks for taking my question.
Good questions. Any other comments or questions about the federal funding requests? Thank you, Ms. Krenko. Appreciate the update. Item 2.8, Career Impact Academy update and city property contribution. Mr. Phelan, good evening.
Hey, Council President Sandy, members of the Committee of the Whole, thanks for having us tonight. I want to point out we have other members here. So I just want to show you in the map, but we also have Becca Krueger, we have Keith Lund from the EDC, John Onken, thanks for all you do. Mike McLean from JLG. Mike McLean, we got some update slides. I want to have him show you the building. And then Eric Ripley, Council President Sandy and others have asked about the programs, sustainability, and I think progress has been made on all fronts, and so tonight's a really important briefing for us. I intend to bring this request on behalf of the City of Grand Forks to the City Council next week, Monday, for this contribution, and then also add it onto the Jobs Development Authority, because there's some Jobs Development Authority property, as you all now know. So this week and next week, Monday would be the last time that you would have seen this particular project, because in November it will be heard and made decisions at the school board meeting. It's in time to make this commitment to the state of North Dakota by December 1. So we're fast approaching November, and so I just want to give you a heads up on that. There's a lot between now and the end of November, a lot of actions going to take place. Tonight I'm asking in this particular area right here, this is the CVB. And I've spoken with Julie Rega of the Convention Bureau, Visitors Bureau, and the City of Grand Forks owns all of this property right here, and obviously the Convention Visitors Bureau, it has this parking lot, and they have the building. And so what we've asked for is Mike McLean's going to come up here, and we want to make this a brand new campus, a brand new infill campus, and instead of being in the downtown or at the University of North Dakota, it's really on Gateway Drive. It could be really cool. So what the goal is, this is a city property that we want to include as part of the value. Also, this particular improved lot would be, and when Mike shows you, will be part of a visitor's lot. So we want to redo that. Ms. Rigg is good with sharing that as a shared use lot, just so that they have some, spots that are near her building. But this is the way the city can contribute to that $10 million. And also share this and create a campus feel with that. So tonight what I'm asking for right now is our city assessing department, in particular Tammy Lazur and Mr. Paul Hodak, have gone through. So what I'm asking tonight for the city in particular beyond the update is that we would contribute this property, notated right here in the dashed, at $591,800. That would be the City of Grand Forks' contribution to the Career Impact Academy as part of the $10 million match. Now, these other parcels were purchased by the Jobs Development Authority. So we have the large property right here, and then the smaller property right here, that were all part of the, I'm going to call it the so-called former Holiday Inn property. And so those two parcels, the one in purple and the larger one that we all know as the former Holiday Inn, that equals $1,144,400. That would be a JDA contribution when I asked for next week from Monday. There's also you've approved the abatement of that property and the demolition, and that total bid was $444,150. So if I add the $591,800 from the City of Grand Forks with the two contributions I just mentioned from the JDA to include the abatement, that would be a contribution to the Career Impact Academy of $2,180,350. So that's what I'm proposing both for the city and for the Jobs Development Authority next week, Monday. The other thing that Mr. McLean is going to talk to you about is there's going to be some infrastructure improvements that are going to need to be made. The City of Grand Forks, will have to make further determinations of how we would contribute that. But there's a road that kind of serves as a service road for the Holiday Inn. I think when this gets redeveloped, it's going to look like more of a city street that's going to allow for bus transportation. There's probably going to be some improvements for underground utilities, and all subject to the City of Grand Forks approval, but there's probably other ways that the city could help contribute to the investment in this facility beyond the building itself too. But that would come later when we have a concept, we have a grant that's approved, and we're in final design, not only on the building, but the off-site infrastructure that's going to serve that, this particular project. So that's the specific request I have for you tonight, but I would like to have the team that's really been working hard on this come up and give you an update on where we're at as part of some of the good news. So with that, Council President Sandy, I'll pull up the PowerPoint presentation. And I think, Becca, you were going to kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Good evening. Becca?
Good evening, President Sandy and Mayor Buczynski, members of council. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Becca Krueger, Workforce Development Manager with Grand Forks Region EDC, and I'm pleased to share with you some of the updates that we have on the Career Impact Academy. So this will be the overall site, and I will let Mike speak to that. Is this our presentation, Todd?
This is GLG's. Do you have
Oh.
I don't have the other one.
Okay.
Just speak to the other one.
Perfect. Well, no problem. So number one, the reason that we're coming before you today is to talk about why we need a Career Impact Academy. And the first thing is we have 1,700 open jobs in our community. We surveyed 117 companies that are EDC member companies and also chamber member companies, and that's the number that they told us. And that's a huge economic impact if we could fill those positions. And the Career Impact Academy certainly will help by introducing students through hands-on, real-world training in Grand Forks to showcase careers that are high-wage and in demand in our region. So we envision this Career Impact Academy to serve both high schoolers and then also adult learners in terms of reskilling and upskilling. The other thing is, when we talked about it, we asked how high schoolers really are deciding their career paths. And, you know, at the 9th grade level, students said that 45% of them had already decided a career path. So just 45% of them. But by the 12th grade level, 75% of students had said that they have decided which career path. Now, I mean, when you talk to high schoolers, perhaps that's true. That's what they're telling and self-reporting to us. But we know that the earlier we can expose students to careers in our region, the better chance that we have in terms of retaining those students for those companies and supporting regional industry. So what we've been doing is we have established and divided into working groups, and we've spent upwards of 1,500 hours as we are preparing to bring the Career Impact Academy to life. We've got a steering committee comprised of leaders from the city, the chamber, the EDC, our educational partners, including Grand Forks Public Schools, Thompson Public Schools, Northland, UND, and Lake Region State College, as well as industry representatives, many of whom are in this room tonight, including John Onken with True North Equipment, who have really become champions of this project because they know how this will impact them. We've also got a public engagement committee that's been working hard. We have done many things. We've exhibited at least 10 different places throughout Grand Forks County, really talking about and educating the public about what this could be. So we've done things like gone out to Thompson football games. We've gone to Red River high school volleyball games. We just exhibited this past weekend at UND homecoming games and farmers markets, really to engage the public on what they want this Career Impact Academy to be. So we're really proud of that, and we know that we are poised to put our best foot forward in terms of a grant application. With that, I am going to kick it over to Eric Ripley, who can really talk about some of the things related to governance and budget, and then ongoing sustainability costs, as well as talk about some of the things we've got planned for programming going in the center.
Thank you, Ms. Krueger. Mr. Ripley, good evening.
President Sandy, Mayor Buczynski, and members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to be here. That means we're providing updates on the Career Impact Academy, and that's a good thing in my case because the momentum continues to progress. I'm going to advance to a couple of slides, this slide right here, and talk a little bit about programming in a sense. It might be hard to read from where you're at, but really what we wanted to do within a program, and I'll talk about that first and finish with governance and budget, is really to represent programs that we feel hit three key metrics. student interest, because these are, at the secondary level, high school courses that kids are choosing to be in. And we think that there's a very vast difference between telling kids what they have to take to graduate versus what they want to take, because that aligns with their future career interests. And so students' surveys are actually being completed again. We did one in the spring. We're doing it at a much larger level right now. We have over 2,300 responses from students saying, are these programs that you're interested in taking? And are you interested in traveling to participate in these programs? Because regardless if you're a Red River Central student or a student from Larimore or Northwood, you're going to need to travel to participate in this type of concept. And the interest in these programs are extremely high. The second metric was, do they have a post-secondary alignment with UND or Northland or Lake Region State College? We feel like it's important to connect students at the secondary level with whatever their next step is after high school. And that doesn't always mean a 4-year degree. It could mean a 1-year certificate, diploma, 2-year associates. Could be on-the-job training or internship opportunities. But we wanted to make sure that there is alignment with available post-secondary opportunities within the region. And then the third one, as Becca talked about, is does that then line up with our regional workforce demands and needs? And so what you're seeing here on the screen, and Mike McLean will certainly go through the building design in a much more detailed format, is the different program areas that we feel represent and check all 3 of those boxes. Everything from aerospace, autonomous systems, medical careers, engineering, welding, precision agriculture, all the way down the list. And so we're certainly excited about that. Again, students are confirming their interest in these programs based off of their interests. We certainly know that these are all career fields that have great opportunities for them. The other piece I want to talk about real quickly then is governance and budget. This will be, I'll give you the snapshot view of what I presented to our school board at last Tuesday's work session. The governance model for this center really is going to mirror exactly what this existing structure is for a virtual area center. So we've had a virtual area center for the last 9 years that I've spoken about with you before. We're serving our neighboring 7 school districts, providing some online coursework to them. And in that model, the school district, Grand Forks Public Schools, serves as both the center board and as the fiscal agent, and I serve as the administrator of that virtual center. That has worked for 9 years. We feel like that model would be successful in this format as well. And so the Career Impact Academy would be the center board would be the Grand Forks Public Schools. The district would serve as the fiscal agent. I would serve as the building administrator, which pretty much means I get to move locations from the MSCC over to this building. But after spending 23 years in CTE, this project certainly is something that I'm not only excited for, but I'd welcome that opportunity. Within the governance model also is the need for our industry employers and our community partners to continue to stay engaged. And the best way that we do that through career and technical education is through advisory committees. So every one of the program areas that you see on the screen, by state statute, but really just by common sense policy, needs to have an existing program advisory committee that can help continue to keep tabs on that program, the relevance of the curriculum, the extended work-based learning opportunities, the ability for the real world individuals to provide some relevance and check marks, if nothing else, on what is happening inside of the classroom. That's something that's in place for existing CT programs, will certainly be in place here. So when we talk about strong support from our community partners for this project, we know that that goes beyond just the capital campaign we're talking about. They want to stay invested and in tune with these programs to make sure that it's meeting their needs and that it's relevant to what students are needing to take away. So we know that those will be in place. And then Mr. Phelan, who's been on our governance committee, also suggested, and the group agreed, that there's a need for our steering committee to have some ongoing capacity to be able to meet at least on an annual basis, and that would be representatives of the city, the county, the school district, the EDC, the chamber, just to, again, is the concept that we're talking about, when it becomes a reality, are we still on point? And kind of a touch base of where we're at with the operations of the center. And so we feel like the governance model that we've suggested would certainly support this facility moving forward. The last piece, which obviously gets the most questions, is budget and sustainability. One of the things that I've mentioned before, and I certainly would do it again, The reason that we're so interested in this type of project at this time is because the funds are there to support a new and expanded CT facility that have not been there before during my professional career. What the state has done on an ongoing basis is support the programming of a center on an ongoing basis. That has always been there. That is intended to stay there. The State Department of CTE funds programs separately from the Department of Public Instruction, so they're not tied to the per pupil payment, to the tune of 40% as a start. And so that would mean 40% of salaries, of benefits, of travel, supplies, of the operations of the center, utility costs, custodial supplies, custodial staff, secretarial staff, administration. So 40% as a starting point. In a specific program, that percentage increases for every school district that's involved within that program. So if we have 4 school districts, for example, taking a program, we get plus 4% on the reimbursement rate for every school district that's involved. So it is encouraging collaboration. It's encouraging a regional center. We have 7 partnering school districts in addition to Grand Forks. So right now, if we had participation from all 8 of those school districts in a program, you're looking at an additional 32% of reimbursement from the state on anything that comprises that center outside of the utilities, which is capped at 40%. They cap it at that. But for a program expense, we feel like that certainly is helpful. The other thing would be is of the staff that we foresee within this facility, the Grand Forks Public Schools already employs 12 of the 16 prospective staff. So they're already on the books, we're already paying for them. But putting them underneath of the Career Impact Academy and pulling them out of Red River and Central and putting them as part of a regional center unlocks a higher reimbursement rate from the state. So the additional dollars from the state, salaries and benefits for those instructors actually offsets the cost of operating the center facility. So the new expenses for this facility will be in new staff that we don't currently have employed that we'd want to hire to be able to expand programs and offerings, which we do. So there will be an ongoing increased cost based off of how many programs are going to be offered out of the gate in day one. That's a very high level, President Sandy and members of the committee about the budget, but we do feel like we have a model in place. The last thing I would mention is our neighboring school districts currently pay a tuition and membership fee to access our virtual courses. That same concept would be in place for the physical center, the ability then to cost share the ability of these ongoing costs, we think is a model, again, that's worked well for 9 years and would serve us well in this facility as well.
Any questions for Mr. Ripley? Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Ripley. So the first thing, I'm going to ask it anyway, although you have pretty much thoroughly answered it already.
Okay.
Grand Forks has to be a regional center. We can't be an island in the region. We have to be serving the region, and it has to be a mutual benefit. There's a lot of incentive for us to do that. We can't be drawing labor from the region and leaving them starved for labor. We need to be training labor for the entire region, and there's every reason to believe that that's what we're going to do. There will be collaboration ongoing in the administration of this from the region. Yes?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And again, based off our student interest surveys, it doesn't matter if you're a student in Mayport or in Larimore or in Hatton or in Grand Forks. There is strong interest from the student level in these courses that we're providing. And those are programs that may not be offered right now in their current school because they're specialized and they take specialized equipment, specialized lab space. So you're exactly right. The state is designed to incentivize districts to collaborate together, to share program costs. They're willing to take up a larger share of the tab to be able to do that. But we also means that is turning out a product then that is beneficial for the region.
Fantastic. The next question I have, I don't know how realistic this is, but we want this to serve as much of the community as possible. We want this to be not an 8 till 3 in the afternoon facility. We want this to be operating in the evenings, weekends, etc. Has there been any consideration, especially in terms of automotive or the building trades, maybe even welding, for some of this to be made available as maker space with less formal training? I think that there's a goal to have people come to this and gain a certificate or some other sort of completion, but also for the community to come out and learn some of these skills, make use of the equipment. Is there the possibility to make some of this maker space, which is very popular in many communities?
Yeah, I think there's endless possibilities, Councilman Weber. Really, when we take a look at, since the very beginning, we talked about this really should be something that's beyond a 9-to-3 facility. And whether those additional programs involve upskilling of industry, conversations with perhaps employers who don't want to take their existing lab space out of production. That's what's used to be able to produce a product. But yet they need a space to upskill their employees. And so things like a welding lab or an automotive shop may provide that opportunity to do that. I know certainly in visiting with our friends at Altru, they're very interested in our medical career space, the ability to utilize some of that space, because there's obviously a limitation of available space to do training right now with everything going on. And so I think those opportunities are there. But I also think beyond that, to your question, there's the ability to do adult ed courses or adult ed type of trainings as well for the general community. Again, the ability to have specialized spaces available in a facility like this, I think provides really unlimited possibilities.
Fantastic. And so to just emphasize again, this is not just for high school students, this is all ages, this is the whole community. This isn't just entry-level training, this is ongoing professional training, etc.
That's what we believe, absolutely.
Fantastic. Last thing, and this is less a question for you and maybe Mr. Phelan, we're looking at the huge sea of surface parking there. Pains me a little bit, but I recognize that it's necessary. But I'm encouraged to hear a bus route coming right through here. Is there the possibility for synergies with the bus route here to serve the long-standing needs in the industrial park? And that's probably something to look at long-term, but maybe it's already been considered.
Get to the end.
Oh, you got a slide for that already?
Mr. Ridley, I've got a few questions for you when Mr. Phelan's done here.
I think number one, this particular location at 42nd and Gateway is in and around where our city buses already go. The challenge has always been with the industrial park. Is that it's never been on a bus route. We've tried some experiments. So this is another positive about this. And so maybe I'll cut to the chase and not steal too much of Mike's thunder. So right now, the thought is, this is North 43rd, that this street, and this hasn't been engineered, this is just the concept, is the buses would come in here and we'd have a drop off right here. And so that's where our city buses or the regional buses, you know, if you're coming from Hatton with the school bus, would park. This would be the visitor. And again, you know, there's a sea of parking out here. However, I think this is also a future expansion area. And so, again, these aren't drawn to scale like someone's done all the due diligence. We need 222 parking spots. Just so you know, this is kind of the thinking is that we need buses. The thought is this probably should become a city street, and then we can maintain that street so that our city buses, it's built in a way that a city bus or a school bus could get in and out of there, and it's not a road that we can't maintain ourselves. So that's some of the thinking right now. I think we need to get through the grant, and then we need to get to a final design that will really have to refine a lot of these concepts as we move forward.
Great. And there's a multi-use path that goes around on two sides of this, isn't there? Yeah.
If you drive by this property, like I did today, it's shocking of how bad it looks. And it's so low. It's going to look so awesome when this building is here. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a renaissance in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan.
Mr. V?
Yep, for Todd, a couple of questions for you. The triangular piece to the east, what's the future of that?
Council President Sandy and Council Member, it is for sale. It's no longer a credit union right now, but I think even though somebody else has purchased it, it is for sale. Again, it's like we're going to talk about property later. You know, somebody probably bought it for 200 and some thousand, and they probably want 400,000 now. So, but what we've said right now is let's kind of make sure this fits within this category, and then come take a look at this, just because time is short. But I think it is something we should take a look at, but we don't need it, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you've got here, don't get me, but I mean, if I look really long-term for the years out, it'd be better to have access off of 42nd, because it's got a signalized intersection up on Gateway, and you could have access from the east and on the east side. And long-term, I see that as better. Now, if we don't have it, then we can't get a reasonable price, then I'd say, do what we got to do here. But I mean, I still think that there is some advantage to at least being aware of that with the way the layout is here.
Maybe with kind of general consensus, Council President Sandy and Councilmember Bean, if there is an interest that because even Mr. Onken talked about, we should probably take a look. If there's an interest, we will seriously take a look at it while we're here. And the city or the JDA probably needs to help lead that conversation. But if you're going to give us permission to go out and try to at least engage in a conversation, if it's reasonable, we'd bring that back to you as part of this long-term plan.
I personally would like to see it as we look at that long-term, that we might be able to do it. One of the questions or concerns I have is up in the area where, on the northeast corner, I'm going to say, of this development, I mean, the whole north end of this thing here used to be basically a landfill. The soils, subsoils, and all that stuff up there, as I recall, is probably not very good. It may even be more ideal, although you don't like to do it for parking, than it is for probably buildings. So I know this is early and you're getting into this and time is short, but I think as you look at the layout of this thing here, you might have some opportunities there that just might be of value for how we would do that. And even for a bus drop-off or something that could be out on 42nd, again, the challenge is always with timing with some of those infrastructure pieces too. So not that this doesn't work. I mean, I like it. I did have one quick question also on the building itself, and this may not be the right answer. Things are always changing. Is this building laid out somewhat to be flexible, and how you would address that? Because the programs come and go. And some of that would be of a concern too.
Maybe if you guys wouldn't mind changing course.
Actually, can I ask Mr. Ripley a few questions first, and then we'll have Mr. McLean come up. Thank you for taking it in 12 different directions, everyone.
Yeah, and I know Mike will respond to the question about flexibility, but the quick answer is yes, absolutely.
It's good that everyone's interested. And Mr. Veen, I didn't know that was the soil is bad up there. That is good information. Mr. Ripley, it's been reported, and I've heard you say that the business plan and the marketing plan aren't done, and I can understand why they're not done, because there's a whole lot of work that is going into fundraising and planning and like insurmountable amounts of work. So I understand why this hasn't been done yet. Although I agree 100% with Mr. Weber and how we need to be regional, I do disagree to a certain degree about how we should be pulling, because we're training, this Career Impact Center is going to be training young people for professions in our greater regional community. Some of those students will find the jobs here. Some of the students for here may find the jobs in Grafton or Hatton or wherever else, right? But I think in general, for this to be successful for all of our regional community, we need to be pulling students from outside of our regional community into our academy to increase, because if there are 1,700 student or jobs today, there will be 1,700 jobs tomorrow. We have a finite, clearly defined number of people here to fill these positions. And so if we somehow find 1,700 people to fill those positions tomorrow, we're taking them from other jobs. We need to, and in my opinion, we need to think more about our region that we're drawing from regionally. Again, in my opinion, needs to be more than the 7 school districts that have bought in, which is why I'm curious if, and I'm saying this because I know the marketing plan isn't done. I wonder if it's possible to, and I also understand CTE Center is hands-on lab work. If there's any way we could, for example, take the computer science portion of this and open it up across the entire state so that we can get other school districts in Crosby and gosh knows where they don't have those capabilities but would want to buy in. That could be one of the partners to help us get 4% of the cost from the state. If we could figure out how to do that, we can actually grow the students that can utilize the academy, and then perhaps somebody in Crosby that may be headed for Billings or Sioux Falls or Minneapolis would actually come to Grand Forks and take part in one of those available careers here. For me, I see that as a huge benefit. I don't know how to do it. It's purely food for thought.
Well, I can respond to that with a couple of thoughts. One is it's a great idea. It's an idea that we've been utilizing within our virtual CT center. We've had 9 years of success within that, but what we've also found is there are certain courses, because of the hands-on nature and the specific lab equipment, that don't deliver themselves in an online environment. Autos would be just a simple answer. But IT, on the other hand, programming, software-based, you can easily deliver that in an online format, and we have been. We've had students in our program from Bismarck and west of Bismarck taking the course from an instructor that teaches out of Red River High School, because again, it's an area that's kind of specialized, hard to find an instructor for, and maybe you are 1 or 2 students in a rural school that want to take that, pretty difficult to support that program. But if you can get it online, certainly. And so we've been able to access that. We view the Career Impact Academy as building on top of the virtual center concept. That's not going to go away. We want to continue to deliver courses that make sense in that virtual space, and you're exactly right. It accesses those +4s for those other partnering school districts outside of our region, and then long-term, to your point, maybe draws them to Grand Forks. I think the other thing is Fargo is in the midst, I think they're like 3 months into the midst of their construction, maybe longer, of their CT center down in the Cass County area. And even though that facility is over a year from being built and opened, there's companies down there already utilizing that as a recruitment tool to say, look what our community is doing to help kind of get kids into the pipeline to then support the occupations that your company may be bringing to our community. So we do think there's a strategy there that could be helpful from the economic development side of things.
Glad to hear that you're already 2 steps ahead of me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's it. That's all I got. Yeah,
Can I
Mr.
ask
Bean?
one
Yeah,
question?
certainly.
How do we work with Train ND? Is that they work together? Can they coexist, or how is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a nice conversation with the Train ND director. So if you are familiar with Train ND, you really have 4 quadrants in the state. And our quadrant is served out of the Lake Region State College. That's actually where Train ND is based out of in Devils Lake, which works well for us because Lake Region State College is one of the partners of this planning grant for the Career Impact Academy. So had a nice conversation with their director talking about the opportunities that Career Impact Academy can offer. And because realistically this is not connected to a high school and is not a typical school, we'll just say it that way, I think there's additional opportunities to bring in customized industry training into this facility. And I will say that we've had this conversation before about Train ND utilizing, let's say, the automotive lab at Red River High School during the day. Well, there's some concerns there because there's other things happening in that school during the day, right? But I think that there's opportunities provided through the Career Impact Academy because it's a standalone facility that maybe don't provide themselves well in our existing CT spaces, and the fact that we didn't have a lot of spaces that fit Train ND's mind in terms of customized training. But they are very interested in this project, in this facility. They're providing a letter of support, and they see themselves providing lots of opportunities once this facility gets built.
Excellent, thank you. I'll make the blanket statement that I typically make. If students are traveling to go to the CTE Center, and we have regional partners such as NCTC and the University of North Dakota that also offer those sorts of classes, I see no reason why our students shouldn't be able to participate in those classes that make sense at those at the university or at NCTC for dual credit, but that's an issue for another day. Thank you, Mr. Ripley. I appreciate it. Mr. McLean. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you, President Sandy and committee members. I think all the tough questions hopefully have been answered already, so thank you, Todd, for that. So we started the pre-design process roughly about 8 weeks ago. So it's been kind of a blur, but it's been really exciting to see all the participation and excitement from students, community partners, and industry partners. In addition to the sessions, the engagement sessions that Becca mentioned, our team was also able to be involved in a community work session that lasted most of a whole day, and we had about 15 to 20 people show up for that. We also had opportunity to meet with about 60 students total on 2 different charrettes or work sessions with them, and it was really fun to see kind of their eyes light up and talking about how this building mean to them and what it should look like. And so today we just want to showcase from the design standpoint how we've kind of incorporated those comments, and then hopefully can answer some questions. So I'll jump again to the site plan. Again, thank you, Todd, for answering most of the questions and explaining this. But from those sessions, a lot of the feedback that we got was typically in a CTE building, the back of house lab spaces and shop spaces, they're hidden from view. They're not celebrated. And so one of the outcomes from that was let's celebrate and showcase these different parts of the building that typically get hidden. And how can we do that? So the other piece to that was we want this building to be highly visible from Interstate and Gateway. I think just thinking about what the site is like now and the opportunity that presents to showcase what a meaningful facility could be, that let's make sure it's highly visible. So that started to inform the layout of the space. And then also I'll talk about the creative hub acting as a spoke to that. If you notice too, I'll just jump back to the previous slide. One thing that came out of this whole process was, I think it was John Ocken that reminded us that this was the old site, approximately where the old airport was. And so the layout of the building is kind of looking like the airport runway. So that was kind of a happy accident, but like we all discussed very early in the process, we know that after the grant, there's going to be a lot of work to be done to fully vet access, parking, we'll have to do soil borings and get all that stuff moving forward. So again, very early on in the process. These are just a couple 3D views showing that it's a 2-story facility. So there will be 2 stories of different programmatic space, and then the high bays kind of at the bookends are a full about 2 stories to accommodate for building trades, auto, and also on the northeast corner is a commons lab that can be utilized for the community for different events, or it can also be used for industry partners to showcase equipment, and then how that can be collaborated with student curriculum. This slide is just showing that we do have the ability to expand through the programming with Eric and his team, and then again with industry partners and students, recognize that there is a huge need for this for all the different programs, and so having the ability to expand those programs in the future, we wanted to make sure that this building did fit for a phase 1 and a phase 2, and I think there's a aggressive group here that's trying to get the fundraising to get as far as we can on this. So going to jump to the outside. So this is a conceptual rendering from the south, I'll call it the south parking lot, looking to the main entrance on the south side. Again, 2-story volume. Wanted to again highlight and celebrate those high lab, high bay spaces that typically you don't see. So you can kind of see that on the right side of the image where the tractor is located. That's a high bay lab space, and then how can the kind of the architecture kind of be informed around that. So we had fun just exploring that, and wanted to really get some visualizations out there that also created excitement for the community and for people that are looking to contribute. Eric touched a lot about the different programs on this slide, but the feedback we got from the students was that they wanted to break down kind of physical walls between classrooms. They didn't want this to feel like a traditional high school. They wanted to see what their classmates were working on. They wanted space like maker space. And so that's kind of informing how this creative hub in the center of the building functions. It allows you to stand in that space, meet with your fellow students, and also see all the activity that's happening around the building and the different programs. So they talked a lot about openness and visibility, but they also emphasized having vertical connections. So if you're at the second story, they wanted to have these skyways or these open connections to the first floor, so you could kind of expand that a little bit further. So that's kind of highlighted in this diagram as well. And then this is a view of that commons in the center of the building, where again could be an opportunity for students, not just local students but regional students, to showcase their work. They could be presentations that happen with students in this space, so we're kind of highlighting what that could look like with a large presentation screen. On the left side of the image, a lot of students talked about a coffee shop in the space and how that could be something that they could actually run as a way to to take on the business side of things, and then how could it potentially be tied to the culinary arts, which would be a space that would be right next to that, which we've heard from surveys and student feedback that culinary arts is one that's a lot of students are interested in right now. At the top of the stair, you see the word impact. That's a meeting space that could be utilized from the community, also from students. And then in the background of the image, there's a kind of an image of a plane, and that's where that community commons lab is proposed to be located. So again, we're very early in the process. It's been fun to get ideas out there. First step for us is we're kind of stopping pencils up right now to, as Todd mentioned, get ready for the grant application and approvals. And if that is successful, we're looking forward to pick up, hopefully early January and really dive into it. So with that, I'll open it up to any other questions that you guys have.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. V.
I like your design, your open architecture, looks amazing. Would there be any LEED certifications? Are you looking for any of that as a part of this?
Yeah, so something that we've talked about a lot with the sustainability portion of it and conversations we've had with the school board is that sustainability used to be kind of an added-on thing, especially in architecture and engineering, and now it's becoming more of something that's baked into the process. And so what we're going to be able to do with software and modeling and just looking at the design is bake that into the process. So we want to come forward with all different types of ideas that, from a sustainability perspective, to say, hey, if you look at this option, this type of mechanical system, this building orientation, this yields this amount of savings, the benefits that go with that could be increased daylight, et cetera, present that case to say, okay, does it make sense to invest more upfront for some of those sustainability concepts if we can show a payback in the long run? If not, then those are things that are easily dismissed, but ultimately we want to be able to present all those options and work through that process and kind of provide the information needed to make the right decision. So whether that means it's LEED certified or not, there's also, there's a lot of other, I'd say, better certifications that are out there right now that have evolved from LEED. So I think at a baseline level, we would expect that this would be a LEED certified building, whether you seek the certification or not. But
yeah, and there's so many different LEED levels, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I think such things as natural light, at least it looks like that for learning and whatever, that would be also value, and potential for solar or whatever else that could have some initial cost, but would certainly help operationally.
Right, and yeah, with natural light, especially on the south side of a building, you have to deal with glare, and so if you're not handling that well, it actually can hurt from a sustainable standpoint. So really diving into understanding what that's going to look like, I think, is important from a holistic perspective. So something that we're looking forward to get into as well. So.
And how many square feet?
Right now, the phase one is anticipated to be between 55 and 60,000 square feet. Phase two would be upwards to about 83,000 square feet. And that's tied more to the grant requirement of the 20 million as a starting point. We want to make sure we're submitting a successful grant application. I think if you talk to Eric, I think the excitement and needs from students and industry partners is probably greater than that 55 to 60. So as we start to dive into more work on the design side, I think getting more excitement and participation from industry and community partners could be important. But right now we're starting at that 55 to 60,000 and making sure we're accommodating for all the different programs that have been identified as needs. So.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Mr. McLean? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Mr. Lund, you going to bring it home tonight?
I'm anchoring tonight.
All right.
President Sandy, members of the committee, pleasure to be here this evening. I think the fact that including Mr. Phelan, that we've had 5 people up here is a real indication of what a community collaboration this project is and how that collaboration is bringing this project to reality. Want to acknowledge a couple of people before I begin. A lot of people involved in this project. Becca Krueger from the EDC and Eric Ripley from the Grand Forks Public School District. A lot of us have a lot of pieces of this. Those two are on this project every single day, driving this project and coordinating the activities of so many, including myself. So really want to acknowledge our leadership in this process. I'm here to talk about two quick things. Number one is timeline, and number two, where we're at in fundraising, which that's always a key question. In terms of timeline, and Mr. Phelan, I think, referenced it, school district is going to need to get permission to move this application forward to the state of North Dakota. We have a preliminary review of that application on November 8th at the Grand Forks Public School Board meeting. And then final approval we're expecting and hoping on November 22nd to give us authorization to move this project forward. We are kind of diving into fundraising a little bit. We've been indicating to companies that we'd like their commitments as soon as possible. We're letting them know that November 15th is the date that we need that, so we can have that in advance of that final school board meeting on November 22nd. In terms of fundraising, it's been reported, and we're issuing press releases on a weekly basis for a couple of reasons. We want to keep the community informed, but we also want to keep the folks that we've asked and will ask for investments to acknowledge the fact and recognize that we have great momentum and this project is going to happen. So as of today, we have $5.5 million secured. We are including the $1.7 million of land, even though you haven't banged the gavel and approved that, but there's been a lot of conversation about purchasing, demolishing the building, and contributing it that we felt comfortable including that, so I'll acknowledge that. As of just a couple of meetings that I had today, we have $2.5 million worth of active requests out the door. And so we have a goal of $10 million. To be able to access the $10 million from the state of North Dakota. I want to acknowledge that the fundraising effort, so I had the pleasure of leading the industry engagement and fundraising group. The early part of that effort was really bringing industry together to inform the programming that you saw in terms of, we asked the question, if we could develop programming that would best suit the needs of your industry, what would that look like? So a lot of what Eric talked about and what Mike talked about today came from those early sessions. And the current part of that really is the fundraising part, is having face-to-face meetings and asking individuals to be a partner with us and help bring this project forward. That $5.5 million has been provided by 15 different organizations, and we have 22 organizations that $2.5 million, 22 organizations have been included in those asks. I have 10 individual meetings this week. I know that others have meetings this week, and I want to acknowledge probably the most passionate person involved in this project. Don Onken is here tonight. He's been a big part of having conversations with companies and brought a lot of that investment home. Others, Mayor Brzezinski and Todd Phelan, have been a part of that effort. And Barry Wilford from the Chamber, Phil Kramer from Lunseth, Al Palmer, who generously said, my efforts with the Veterans Memorial Park is done, and I want to continue to give back to the community, and asked if he could help us out, and we said a quick yes to that. Superintendent Brenner, John Regenbald, and Sherry Elgin from Construction Engineers is a part of that effort, as well as myself. So a tremendous team and passionate about it. We really honestly have a short amount of time to wrap this up, but we're committed to bringing it home, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Lund? Hearing none, certainly Mr. Ripley and Ms. Krueger are doing significant work, and
They are.
much appreciate them, as well as all the people that are volunteering their time and efforts for the fundraising. Thank you all for what you do.
On behalf of the team, I appreciate the opportunity to brief you, and thank you for your ongoing support.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Anything else for the good of the order, Mr. Phelan?
No, just to move approval.
Just to move approval of which part?
The staff report provides to move forward with the city's contribution of that noted land that I discussed and then the remaining part for will be in ownership of the Jobs Development Authority will come to your meeting next week, Monday. And so at next week, Monday's meeting at the Jobs Development Authority, you'll approve a contribution. And then, of course, if you move forward with the city contribution, you will do also.
So, just moved by Weber. Is there a second? Second by Dockler. I'll make one thought, Mr. Phelan. When we first started talking about the CTE Center, we were in general being asked for $1 million. Now we're coming up with $2 million, and there's been some discussion, somewhat by me, about ongoing operational support for the CTE Center as well. although I, a few weeks ago, probably wouldn't have been excited about this, I think, you see the level of support that they're getting from the community and from local businesses. I think it's great, and I will continue to say that this is a project that we all have to take ownership of, and so I really do, I'm in, like before, I'm begrudgingly agreeing to spend the money, but I think it's important, we need to do it. And so it'll be good for our community when this comes through. I do appreciate all the work that everyone's been putting in on the project, so. I did actually have one question related to the dedicating this piece of property. The parking lot for the CVB. At some point, we don't know if the CVB is going to be there forever. The city may end up 10 years from now deciding that we want the CVB on the south end or somewhere else. This is probably for you, Mr. Gosted. What sort of protection are we going to have in an agreement so that we can guarantee that that parking lot will be available for whomever may inherit that building at some point in the future?
Yeah, I'm maybe not following your question. You want to know if the city can reserve some rights with respect to that parking?
Yes, correct.
It's just a matter of drafting the document to assure ourselves that we have some reservation of rights. Whether we can record it on the deed itself would probably be the best way to do it, so it's in the chain of title.
Yeah, I think we'll just need to make sure that because that building becomes much less valuable when there's no parking. So, okay, there's a motion and a second. Mr. V, yes, sir?
One quick question here. I understand where you were at, Mr. Sandy. Can we afford to do this as we've been going through it? My thought is, can we afford not to do this? So I bring that forward. And the last thing is, are we building it big enough? Because I think this is going to become very successful long-term, and that we don't short ourselves.
I think Council President Sandy and Council Member Bean, I think we agree with both of you. You said, I don't know if we can do it, but we have to do it. So that's been our mindset too. And I agree with you. It seems to me, I haven't been to Red River or these other classrooms, but the classrooms are less than stellar. And so like really all great facilities, I think once we have a great facility, it's going to drive student interest. We're already turning away students to programs because we don't have space or the facilities for them. I think once we get extraordinary spaces with equipment and this, that, we're going to drive more students wanting to be in these programs. And so I think that's why we need to be flexible and invest and sometimes people lead from behind, right? Once something's successful, they figure it out and say, hey, well, we should have built it twice as large and this, that, and the other. I think that will come. So we're trying to find that midpoint of what we can afford. And so we don't just open up the building and say, well, we should have built it X amount of larger. So it's really is a balance. And whatever you can do to people to get them excited about this and want to invest in this particular facility.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Any other comments? Approve the purchase of the sale. There's a motion and a second, or the gift. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to talk the Career Impact Academy tonight. Item 2.9, Public Arts Commission update and request for support. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy, another great item that is in front of the community. So tonight I'm with Joe Kozart. I'm going to introduce him. He's the new PAC Executive Director. Jill Nelson, Sally Miscavige, Or are you Miscavige? And Miscavige, and then Bruce Jovic. So I really want to give these folks credit that they've really been driving the energy. And, Sally's been a great driver from the private sector of let's get something done, and that's been inspirational. Bruce Jovic has been that senior member of the group, and I really appreciate working with him on some of the legacy. Jill Nelson's been wonderful in the Park District. And so Jill Nelson, Joe and I have been working this. And so really when this came back to life, I was hoping that it would just go away, but I kind of sucked it up. And the more we've been working on this, the more excited I've gotten that let's get to some action on this whole thing. And so I'm really excited about being here this evening. I think similar to the previous conversation about the Career Impact Academy, this is an and. This is positive sum, and so we're not taking away from anybody or any group in this. This is just adding and trying to get to action in this particular item as we go through that. So I'm going to tackle some of the first slides. Joe, you're going to come in the middle about what PAC is doing. Then I'm going to try to close here about what the funding partnership and ask is in this particular case. Just starting with I'm going to start with when I arrived on the scene of this particular thing in 2014, I became city administrator and this project came forward. So this city council, and I was really impressed with the city council at the time, you authorized moving forward with a public art master plan, and the community hired Forecast Public Art, and that was a 50-50 funding partnership between the city of Grand Forks and the Community Foundation. So we moved forward with a master plan. This city council approved, you received and filed the plan, and then we were to get to action, and that was in that 2016 timeframe. Along the way, PAC has absorbed NOVAC as part of that public arts organization as we move forward. And really 2016 and forward, so if you look at all the great things that are going on downtown and throughout the community, really 2016 was the start of a lot of that momentum building. So we did form, as you recall, we had some vibrancy committees. We did have a public art vibrancy committee, and they noted let's move arts to the CVB, and then let's put our arts regranting to Community Foundation, and they've been doing a terrific job since 2018 forward. So when I talk about public art tonight, I'm not talking about that art regranting process that we set aside about $130,000, and Community Foundation operates that, and that gives money to arts organizations across the community. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. This is really public art and how we can move forward with some further actions. Again, this is that you probably remember this grand version convergence, similar to what they McLean talked about with a lot of community groups. We had lots of meetings that developed this grand vision and convergence. And really, we probably have been muddling through for the last few years on this, and we had a pandemic year and a half, so a lot of this is understandable. But I think with the team now, with the board, with Joe, I think now is really the time for action, and I'm really excited about that. And if you look down below the priority areas, that's really what we've been doing since 2016 forward. And I think all four of those bullets, when people say Grand Forks has got it going on, and there's a lot of great things happening in Grand Forks, it's because this public art and this Forecast Public Art Master Plan really helped ignite the community, and played its role in really moving the community forward in those areas. We went on a couple of visits. So we went up to Winnipeg and we saw how they did public art, and then we also headed down to Fort Collins and we looked at what Fargo did, and we looked at what other communities are doing. And so the importance of this slide is not the arrows and the boxes, but it's really how do we become a really great collaborative partner community in public arts and really drive economic impact and quality of life. And so really this is what we're doing informally, and we just want to get to the next level. So, you know, on this chart it has UND and it has East Grand Forks, the Park District, the City of Grand Forks, it has this Arts Council, and it has these public-private collaborators. And so these are some of the models that came out of that Forecast Public Art about what could really work in Grand Forks. We're not here right now, but really what we're asking today, let's informally keep working and doing the great things we're doing, because I think we'll come back to this in a couple of years and this will make more sense as we keep working forward. Again, public art is what this new group is really hoping to do. They want to build support and awareness. They want to facilitate a public art program. They want to organize art events in our community. They want to partner and engage with the community, not only the public sector, but the private sector. And then finally, they want to coordinate, educate, and advocate. And I think that's really one of the important things that Mr. Cozart has done, is that he's partnering with people. And so instead of people running away from the public art organization, they're running towards Joe, and they're not only running towards you, Joe, they're also giving financial contributions. So it's really been a nice sea change of what's been happening over the last little while that I've seen just personally. So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Joe to just kind of give you a sense of what public art, and then I'll come back to the specific asks and the funding with that. So I'll take it over, Joe.
All right.
Mr. Cozart, good evening.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mr. Sandy, Mr. President, and council members. My first time being before you, and I appreciate the opportunity. So if I am awkward, help me out. But the most important thing I think tonight as we look at this slide is that the leadership of the board has really stepped up. One of the things that I challenged them to do when I first came on board was to be inspired, to re-inspire themselves. And I told them I could help them with that by helping them to unlock their potential, increase their awareness, become more responsible, and grow. And they immediately, I mean, that afternoon started contacting me with ideas, and I started to realize that some of them had not been speaking up, as often. So we were just very excited with the type of leadership that you see here. And I want to take a moment to just, as you see here, to recognize the board. And as Todd has already done, I have Bruce Jovic, our chair, here with me tonight. Also, Sally Miscavige, who's been doing a phenomenal work for us. She's, as you know, does a lot of work with TAG, and she has just really come alive to partner with us. Bruce has been doing it, as Todd said, is for scores years, and then also Jill Nelson, who's new to us at TAG, but certainly not new to you, and she has just been phenomenal in everything that she has brought to us to help us work through this process. I do want to point out also that we're honored, starting in January, to have First Lady Kathy Armacost from the University of North Dakota, and also Attorney Alec Reichert is coming on the board as well. So we're very enthusiastic about the plans that are happening in the leadership aspect of it. And as you know, that's probably one of the most important parts, if not the most important part. As I switch over here, I do want to make a, did I skip one? Or no, okay, good. I just want to make sure, yeah. There we go, good. Now, that when it comes to impact, I just want to point out that it has to be compelling. And I think what you're going to see here is a compelling argument that the most important thing that we have in this community when it comes to the arts is the local artist. And we had to go out and do some fence mending with our local artists. We wanted them to understand that there is a diversity and inclusion of all artists. And the best way to do that is, obviously we're serving the public, so the best way to do that is to make them feel included. And we have a phrase that you'll hear me repeat a couple of times tonight: put the artists first and the community always. And all that means is that the community wouldn't have the art they need if you didn't have the artists in the community. So let's just do everything we can to support the artists. And one way we're going to be doing that is by making sure they have financial growth and in community engagement. But financial growth is going to be one of the most important things, and anything that we do there, we wanted to do as I say, for the artists, which is actually for the community. In other words, if you have the artists being taken care of, the community is getting the art that they deserve, and again, a very diverse art, so more inclusion than one would realize by the events that we have and by the events that we're going to have. Again, if you don't recognize people, and I think good recognition is extremely important, and I also really believe that, especially when it comes to our donors and the people that have provided us money over the years. Sometimes they've been missed, unfortunately and sadly, in their recognition by leadership, and so that's something that has changed. And so I think, again, that is an inspiration to the leadership that we see here. When we get down to some of our projects here, I'm going to let Todd just take a moment here to speak to the Northern Rose, simply because the city made such an impact in this particular project.
Thank you, Joe. As you recall, the Northern Rose, we played a significant role in speaking with Council President Sandy. We wanted the kind of a pilot example of trying to ignite and doing a public project. This was really it. And this wasn't meant to be the last, it was merely meant to be the first moving forward. And so as you recall, one of the requirements that we had is, hey, let's have the Public Art Commission. They work with the artists and they create this public art piece, and the city will come in with the infrastructure. And in this case, the city's invested about, I'm going to say around 80 to 90,000 on the concrete base, the lighting, some of the other utilities, some of the design of this from a facility perspective. Is that how we invested as part of this? Also partnered with the Grand Forks Park District, and they helped with some of the landscaping and those sorts of things. I think we can perfect how we worked on this one in the next opportunity. We also helped with on the planning and zoning side of trying to pick the right site. This is obviously on a public property. in front of the candidate in the Alara Center. So those are all the component parts that we're willing to work, and this was really meant to kind of inspire that we can do great things along the 42nd Avenue corridor or street corridor and other places. I think the next one is what's next, and I think what I've seen is they want to look on the next public art, and this probably will not happen next year, but they are fundraising to create another public art, and this was meant to be the confluence. And I think, again, similar to what we did previous, we'll help them work on a really great site for this art piece and then do all the infrastructure pieces really to make this magnificent. While they do their part, we'll do our part to help facilitate and get this up and going and moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the project's in the works. I'm going to let Jill just touch for a moment on this. She's from the parks, and she's just going to just stand up where she is and just speak. Oh, you got to come up. Sorry. Excuse me.
Ms. Nelson, good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President Sandy and the council members. So just a quick overview. This is just one project that we have in the works of how we can blend public art with fitness and just being creative, really. So we're just in the conceptual stage at this, but PAC had approached the Park District about doing some sort of a unique project where we could have public outdoor fitness and combine it with art, and what would that look like? And the National Fitness Campaign, and I believe that's put on by Wells Fargo and Sanford University over the years, they'll actually give grant dollars. I believe it's a $60,000 grant. The project itself is $180,000, and that would bring it down to about $120,000, which is very realistic to build an outdoor fitness park and combine it with art. And it could be whatever we want as far as the mural on the other side. So we're the Park District, so we'll probably have something pretty obvious like, you know, the landscape of what Grand Forks is or something along those lines, or maybe involving kids in that artwork itself. But that's just one of the examples that we're looking at, trying to be creative and use fundraising dollars and other resources that are available to us to incorporate art into our everyday public use facilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And as we're winding up here for my portion, pop-up galleries is something that has been new to us. We have standard galleries that are in place, as you know, right now, that was said earlier in the slides, at the Alara Center, at the South Altru location, and also in City Hall. But pop-up galleries have been proven to be very successful where, say, Choice Bank, for instance, just using that as an example, would say, let's host a pop-up gallery. We'll allow you to, you know, artists to bring in their art. We'll allow you to put labels on them so that there'll be a description, even pricing. And we'll have an opening, you know, I'll call it a wine and cheese, if you will, opening, and then that'll last for as long as they want it to last. And then, you know, I've talked to the Grand Forks Country Club, and they're checking with their folks. There's several others that I've talked to. And so, again, we're not looking to have these too often, but we're looking to be inclusive enough and have them in locations where people can come to these pop-up galleries. So we're very excited about that, and we've been very fortunate to receive some good funding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Mr. Cozart.
So here's the request, and again, I want to thank Bruce, Sally, Jill, and Joe, and they've really inspired, and we had some meetings they really wanted to get to action, and so I'm really appreciative. Number two, Mayor Wojciechowski and you, Council President Sandy, you know, sometimes I'm skeptical of is this going to go, and you encourage me, let's bring this forward and start to move forward. So thanks to everyone to get us to this moment. So I think there's a constructive and positive way forward in this case. So what the group is asking for is $50,000 of one-time money to create an art collection, registry, and documentation. And so when I thought about this, that's that $15,000. So what the PAC is willing to do is that we have 165 pieces throughout the community. And much like all infrastructure, we probably should have been managing and maintaining it, who's doing what. Well, we haven't done that. And so what they're willing to do is to put a registry together, not that any different than what we do on a day-to-day basis with all of our infrastructure we have with the city. So that's what that request is. The other $35,000 is really to get a kickoff campaign to celebrate public art. And so as you note, this is really feeding off of what we've been already doing and building momentum, whether it's Grand Forks or Cooler or others. So these are one-time activities, really, number one, to document what we have, and then how are we going to maintain them, how are we going to assign them and do all those sorts of things. Councilmember Dockler had asked me, like, for instance, the Prairie Rose, the PAC had agreed to maintain that facility. That's probably the only agreement we have with any public art piece in the city of Grand Forks right now. So it's really trying to figure out what we have and how we're going to maintain it long-term so they can really be assets in our community, and then really celebrating as part of a campaign. How I'm proposing to fund this right now, I've attached Economic Development Fund 2163. Within that fund, you have a cash balance that is not asked for, whether it's for the Beacon by Epic projects or other projects, of $65,338 to be exact in that fund. They're asking for $50,000 of one-time money, so I would use that one-time money to help fund this activity. This is, to me, a 21-year activity and 22 activity. So that's the first request that in funding. Also would like an associated budget amendment because I would bring that cash balance into this year's budget year. The request number 2 is to use $25,000 request for maintaining the public art exhibits. And so as you know now, we have one at the Alara Center. We have one here at City Hall. There is also one at Ulster South. One of the things that we have talked about looking to add to this, these exhibits, is that we have the Grand Forks Herald building that's going to be renamed at some point, but it's going to become our tech accelerator. So if you think about that community room, that's probably another city/JDA that should have a public art exhibit in that wall. So instead of having all the former Herald flood photos, that's really going to be another building to do that, I think, as we move forward. So what they're asking for is to help support that. They want to do it 4 times a year, and so they want to do more and more of these, and really to create some interest in all these particular buildings. So what I propose on this one is that we would use our again, 2163 Economic Development Fund strategic initiatives. And right now in the 22 budget, we have $100,000 budget. So I would use $25,000 of that $100,000 budget for next year to move forward with that opportunity. And then this capital infrastructure maintenance. And going back to 2016, what we did is, right now we have $130,000, a little plus, set aside for beautification. And so what that committee did back in the time, recommended back to the City Council, and City Council concurred conceptually that let's carve off 35% of that $130,000 for public art, and the rest can go to traditional beautification. So annually that spends off a little over $45,000 for, I'm going to call it capital maintenance related to public art. So regarding the request for $35,000, again, we'd carve off some of that beautification money. That's only the $35,000 of that's already of that $45,000 plus. So what I'm saying in this case, we would do the one-time money for the $50,000, ask for the budget amendment. In the 22 budget, we already have funds set aside for these activities. But finally, what I think is the right thing to do, and Council President Sandy and I talked about that, we should draw up an agreement, whether it's an MOU or something, to kind of memorializing what we're planning to do with this authorization and how we're going to account for it. And my thought is, let's work through 21 and get into 22, and I'll probably be back here sometime in 22 looking at 23 and beyond. But then I would have something to show along with my teammates over here. Coming forward, we'd have something to do. So really, that's the request that we have tonight. I think we have funding sources for all these. I think it'd really kick off those sort of things. So I'd ask you to approve in my staff report, I have approval of 1, 2, and 3 that really summarizes what I talked about with those outcomes. So with that, we take any questions, myself, Joe, or any of the board members. And again, this, I'll say one more time so people get concerned. We do have arts regranting funding that's set aside, the $130,000, and how that's distributed is 6% of that goes to the community foundation because they run that program. That would still happen under these cases. I'm not using any of that money. That money will still go out to all the different arts agencies.
And also, none of this will be used for staff salaries. I think that was an important component that we all agreed to, that this would not be used, that we would handle that separately. And I'm going forward would be the only staff member, so.
I'll say one last thing, Council President Sandy. Mr. Cozart has talked to me about, he's gone out to seek funding from, public and private entities, and I think it's having some success. I think in part because the city of Grand Forks is supporting public art. They want to make this happen. I think that's really important for a city council to show support. Sally was pretty direct with me as hey, if the private sector is going to invest in things, I want to show that the city is going to invest in this too. So what we're asking is approve this, we'll come back and show some results, and we'll look at 23 and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Cozart, comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
I'm a sucker for this stuff, and I was inclined to vote in favor of almost whatever was coming forward because I believe in the importance of public art. The art festival and the art and wine walk, these are nothing new. They've been here for at least a decade, I think, probably much longer. Can I ask is it Mr. Huther, Gordon Huther? Who is he? Where's he from?
I'm going to let Mr. Jovic speak to that, please.
When Bill and Jane Marcille pledged $300,000 for art, we set up an art selection committee, and we had 83 or 80-some number responses, including from Gordon Huther from California. And the art selection committee then chose them out of the best out of the 83, and then we showed it to Bill and Jane Marcille, the proposal. They also accepted it because it was donor driven, and so they are now, and they made a pledge of $50,000 a year for 6 years. And this coming year is their last payment of $50,000. So we'll be commencing that and looking for a site based in that. So Gordon, he's done a number of public art projects around the nation. So he's a national, international known artist, the best way to put it. And if you look at gordonhuther.com, if I remember right, you can see a lot of his artwork.
Very good. And there's value in bringing in outside artists, and it raises the prestige and everything else. But we must support local artists. We have to think about where they can live, what they do for health insurance. These are the kinds of things that communities who have really connected the dots on public art have done. They've looked to their local artists. And you've said the importance of local artists, put the artists first. And when I look at the board, I mean, art culture has to include all of the arts. And so you have a couple performing art directors, art collectors. These are all part of it, but there are no artists, no local artists that I'm seeing involved here right now. And as far as I can see, none of this money that you're asking for goes to fund local artists. I don't see how any of this is going into the pockets of our local artists. So, like I said, I mean, I'll move approval, and I'll probably vote in favor tonight. We're making a recommendation to council. This will come back to council for consideration next week, and then I'll see what I'm going to do next week. Sure, Mr. Jovic, sorry.
Your issue. One thing we should point out.
Can we get a second? Is there a second on the motion first? Second by Weigel. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Mr. Jovic.
When we created the art exhibit at the Alaris Center and at Altru and at the City Council, City Hall rather, I mean, all that was creating a marketplace for local and regional artists, right? And it's for sale. And for example, the last number we saw was there was 32 works of art sold in our last 3 openings that we had to say. That is creating exactly what you're trying to support it, right? And we need to know that the money that we are spending.
For years, and that art has been for sale as well.
Mr. Weber, can you use your microphone, please?
And as you well know, my art collection of over 200 pieces is almost all entirely regional artists that I bought the art from. Well over $250,000 worth of art. One of the things we can get the private sector to do is to pay for the artists, right? They will give money for the artists to do art. The hardest part we're asking for the city for is the infrastructure piece that, donors don't want to pay for, like things like, maintaining art and running a gallery, but believe our commitment to the artist is strong. And that is what the private donors will do. It's what I have done. It is others who do. And it will be a blend of both national, international artists and local, with a very strong focus on the local and regional artists.
Very good. Thanks for that. And I moved approval.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Is there other comments? Mr. Veen?
Yeah, I mean, and Todd knows I'm a big fan of public-private partnerships. What I'm not necessarily seeing here is the total picture of where's the public, where's the private, and how does that come together to make this work? I'm kind of like was just stated, I love the idea of public art. I think it's got some great concepts to it, but I'm not sure I see the large picture at this point for how that whole thing works together. And there's a number of programs here. So that's my first comment. I have a hard time supporting it until I see exactly how this all comes together. And then I would love to see the local artist part of it too. I wish there were local artists here to support what's going on. And when I don't have that in some what I've seen in the past, it makes me skeptical about where we're at. So, I mean, those two things, not understanding, maybe it's here, I just haven't seen it, the whole partnership thing, and not having that here, to me creates an issue that I'm not understanding. I love the idea of maintenance. I think that's one thing that's always exactly what you said. Hard to get anybody that wants to pay for maintenance. I mean, it's like you need to set up some type of endowment so that this thing lasts forever, because once you get in here, you got to maintain it. And I know with the art that was over on 42nd, there were some questions about that being maintained. I don't know who did that maintenance this year, but there was some issues with it not being maintained. So that's the question that I have. That's the skeptical part I have that I would love to learn more on.
We can blame the Park District for, I'm just kidding.
Council
Mr.
President Sandy and Council Member Veen, I was one of the skeptics too. So I think what we're trying to do in this particular case, I think when we come back on Monday, what we'll do is we can explain the local artist part of that. We can do a better job on that. But the other part, we'll bring in the other investment. I know I focus on what the request is of the city, so I'll go back and we'll better explain how the other pieces are part of this. I think this is really important is if you look at the Registry of Public Art Collection, again, I agree with that. No one's really going to want to pay for that. I think that really goes to really the $35,000 in capital construction and annual maintenance. So we can really tie those together. Let's get a list of what we have out there, and then that $35,000 for that really plays well with one another. The art galleries in city buildings, that really plays to the local regional artists that we want to display in our various buildings. And the City Vibrancy campaign, I think that should really be driven by local regional artists. And I think as part of the the agreement that we have, I think because we're going to invest in this, perhaps I would do a couple things in the agreement. Is number one, we have follow-ups to City Council, and that we do have some participation. If there's a want to make sure that there's committees with local artists that are a part of some of these groups, we can certainly make sure that we do that because we're investing in some of these activities.
Do we have I'm assuming you have budget projections and all that. We haven't seen any of that to know how this is going to come together. I personally, like I said, I love the idea, but I'd like to see us keep this in committee until we have more answers before we take it to a vote for the City Council. That's just my view. I'm not saying we shouldn't go that way, but I'm struggling until we see those answers.
But Mr. Veen, in my opinion, as Mr. Phelan mentioned earlier, this is an and, not an or. I totally 100% agree with Mr. Weber's concern about the artists, which is why we continue to put the same amount of money, the $123,000, into the arts programs that we always have. This is in addition to what we've always done. We're adding more money, making more money and resources available to the artists, more capability for them to have galleries and sell art in order to generate revenue for themselves. This is what you like, Mr. Weber. This is more spending, not less.
If we
Right?
want
I mean,
to,
this is more spending on art, isn't it?
this is spending on unnecessary maintenance and infrastructure. If we're talking about the local artists, the amount of funding that we've given to the re-grant program has actually shrunk each year by virtue of inflation. We haven't been supporting them sufficiently. We do give every year, and it would be great to see, whenever we vote on this, to see local artists in the room saying, we support this, we need this, and it's a piece that I'm not seeing right now. Thanks.
I think, if I may, I think I ought to speak, Mr. President and Mr. Weber, and also Mr. Vane, to your question, and I'm going to go back to a slide here because we may not have done a good job of covering that based on the amount of time. But so I've been here 60 days in the position, and most of my time has been out meeting with artists. Okay, and that's where the pop-up galleries came from. They said they wanted more pop-up galleries. I do agree with you that it would be great to have them attend, and we invited, and they were saying, no, I love everything you're saying. My experience from Disney is in the hotel, but also in the art, because if you're part of Disney, you're part of the art community. And so everything we do there is very inclusive, very diverse types of art. So one of the things that I went out to do was just, in my opinion, was mending fences. So I'll just drop some names like Kelly Thompson or someone, like that, or Adam. They were somewhat disappointed, obviously, in some of the past relationships that they've had, and I think you're aware of that. And so them and many more I have met with, and they've all told me they were inspired because I started off with a story about my Disney background, about how I ended up in Grand Forks in the hotel business, but meeting weekly with Bruce Jovic at Skies, just as friends, all we talked about was Public Arts Commission. And so eventually I felt like there would become an opportunity where I would get involved. I was on the docket last year, but that didn't work out. And so this year things have worked out because of different relocations and things of that nature. So we have a strong history, I think, of understanding, and I think you're 100% correct. I couldn't agree with you more. And the only thing that we don't have here, I've done everything you've asked except have the artists in the audience, and because I have definitely met with them, and this is what they've asked for, is give us opportunities to sell our art, and that we don't have to pay money when we come, to sell our art, and then pay, so I said we would do that if we could get, some type of partnership. And so I'll leave it at that. I think you understand what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler.
So I guess I just have a couple of things. I'm missing a budget. I'd love to see a detailed budget just for both different asks, the annual ask and the one-time ask. That helps me make a decision moving forward. I can see you're asking for the money. I can't see what it's going for, and I can't see what kind of partnerships that you have. Mr. Jovic has shared some private partnerships, but he hasn't talked about any of the grants that you possibly have obtained to help support this. Where's the match, or is the city just funding all of these completely? I'd also prefer, if we are moving this forward to vote on, I prefer that they were separate things we're voting on. One as the annual ask and one as the one-time grant ask, because we may support one and not the other. And then I'd also like to make it mandatory in our MOU, or whatever it is that we end up writing, that public report be back to council at council meetings on like a quarterly basis on how the money is granted and used, if it is approved by council, just because I think that's going to be important, especially in any kind of transparency for PAC moving forward. I don't think it's a secret at this meeting that there's some relationships that need to be pretty aggressively managed, and transparency is going to be key in doing that. I also think it's bold to ask the council to fund a one-time $50,000 grant and a $60,000 annual funding when we know that this has been the relationship with local artists in the community for years past. It's not me saying no, but it does take a minute for me to think about those things also in determining how I move forward. I guess if I start with the $50,000 one-time ask, how much, it said in the slideshow that we would be paying interns or compensating them for their time, which is great. I always, as a student myself at UND, I love to hear that other students get to have paid internships. I'm wondering at what compensation rate that would be, since you are asking for $50,000.
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Dockler, I'll let Joe answer some of those questions. How we would set up the agreement, if you did so approve, these would be up to numbers, and so generally any agreement that you approve with the City of Grand Forks is an up to number, and number two is based on reimbursement. So we give you an up to number, and then we pay bills, not, we just don't give you 50,000, you get reimbursed. And so I think that number two, to allay some of your fears, obviously someone has to review it. And I think if you even couple that with ongoing reports, like quarterly reports, you're going to see what's going on, what we're spending money, and what progress is being made in that vein. And certainly, along with some of the private investment, we can certainly bring back some more of the particulars on the budget too by next week, Monday too, to help allay some of your fears. But that's how generally agreements are set up with the City of Grand Forks. And I don't know if Joe has anything to add.
Could I ask for a little clarification, Ms. Dockler? You said that this has been, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but some of the funding has gone to the arts in the past. So you made a point that, it sounded as though you made a point that PAC was asking for would be getting something that in the past had been managed or done. Perhaps it was related to the current public art pieces. I'm trying to understand if it's dollars that you're concerned about, or management, or what the exact concern was. Are you following me?
Not really.
Yeah, okay.
But I could say that it's all of those things because I want to know how it's going to be managed. Sure. And I don't want to, before I say yes, I want to give these dollars.
Sure.
Especially based on, maybe this is what it was, based on previous relationship with local artists in the community, and why we're having this kind of veiled conversation about how we need to rebuild these relationships and bring the local artists into council chambers to see that they support PAC moving forward, especially at such a high dollar amount that we're talking about. I think public art is great. I'd love to see more of it. I'd love to even see murals downtown. I think it's great. I think it gives kind of a unique spin on the different communities that have it. I also think that it highlights and honors our local artists when it's done in conjunction with them. But I think perhaps that's what has been missing in the past, and that has been the criticism. I guess another question that I had too is that I guess I haven't gotten an answer yet, is how much would those interns be compensated for, and how long would their internship run for? Would it be traditional 2-semester, or just until the project itself is done, or when the money runs out?
Just Council President Sandy and Councilmember Dockler, to be fair to Joe, I would say we would want to model it something similar to what the city's already doing with the University of North Dakota, is that, generally we pay interns, I'm going to say in that $12 to $16 an hour, generally over a semester. Sometimes they carry overs. So I think we'd model that after something similar to engage students in this art area as we move forward. So we do something similar in that vein. So we could help, again, because it's a city agreement, we're going to reimburse. We'd be the party of trying to set up some of the works. I think even with the dedication of the 2020, part of this, why it's here, let's look forward to 2022, we're in 21. So the 25,000 and 35,000 is really meant to put in agreements that we'd come back with an action plan. But before people do a lot of work, they want to know if there's a funding commitment to do that. And for example, on that 35,000 for capital construction annual maintenance, we'll come up with a work plan in that regard. The 25,000 is meant for things that we're already doing, and again, that would be reimbursement. We're going to try to find other public spaces where we can do public art too. So it's hard to work on a final plan when you don't have a funding commitment too. And so I do understand you need a bit of faith in city administration to work with these folks. But I think you've got plenty of opportunities of us coming back with more specific plans. But partly is this, is are we interested enough to get to action with the city council on these funding, and then we'll come back more specific plans to report back to you.
I do have more questions, though.
Okay,
So for the
great.
50,000 one-time annual, those are my questions, but then also, or not annual, the one-time, but for the 60,000 annual, I'm wondering, right now, my understanding is that our beautification fund, we set aside like 30%-ish for maintenance and new work. Is this, as President Sandy was saying, in addition to this extra $35,000 and $25,000 that we're adding?
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Dockler, no, this is, that's part of that 35%. We agreed to set aside of that 100, right now it's about 130,000. And so that equals, over 40. So actually what the request in that case is actually less than what we said we were going to set aside. So, but we're trying to formalize this into agreement with PAC. So there is not that concern about, how did PAC get money? We're going to have a formal agreement with them. So just so everyone knows, it's not additional. It's actually less than what we, conceptually said, let's carve out 35%. It's less money than that.
So have we had a difficulty with maintaining our public art structures up to this point?
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Dockler, I think part of the problem is we don't even know we have 150 public art pieces. So I think part of it now is if we're really going to showcase these things, let's see what kind of condition they are, signage, all those things. Let's really make it an amenity in our community. And so I think that's really where it's at. I think when we looked at the Prairie Rose public art structure, that was really intended for PAC to maintain long-term, along with having the city and the park district help support too. So I think this is really a renewal. I think once we get that long spreadsheet of all the public art we have in our community, then we really have to figure out what are we going to maintain, what are we going to keep, and how are we going to do it. And I think PAC's in a really good position to do that. What I said to PAC and Mr. Cozart is, let's not go after that arts regranting, because then we'd have the whole room full up here, okay? And then sadly, we fight over things that we ought not to be fighting. So I'm trying to focus this on what I would call public art. Let's do what you do well, and let's get moving with a plan, and let's not take from anybody, whether it's in the other art category. So this plan, if you look at the 22 plan, really it's just executing what we said we were going to do within an agreement. The only difference is that with that 25,000 for 22, what they're asking for is that, can you provide some more funding support for all that we're doing in all these city buildings? And so that's really what it is. And I think Council President Sandy did us a favor by, let's come to the city council and discuss this. These are all within administrative authorities that we could do, but we should have a public conversation about this so that you know what we're doing and get the city council more engaged about what's happening in our community.
I do have another question too. For the art gallery openings, those are really fun to go to. I highly suggest you go if you haven't before. It's wonderful and you get to interact with artists. However, I am wondering, part of this annual ask is to help fund for costs for signage, advertising, food, music, etc. Is PAC not going to CVB for special events funding for these events? This would fall into that realm.
I'm not sure, Joe's just been here for 2 months, so in
There's a partnership.
in the past, as part of the arts granting, PAC has submitted grant applications for some of their programs. Some of the programs that Mr. Cozart went over, the art, summer art festival and those sorts
Art
of
on
things.
the Red.
Yeah, they have done that, and they've received a percentage of that. I suspect they're going to want to do some of those just to sustain some of those ongoing revenue projects too.
I think I can answer your question too. The art that is carried out, that is the most expensive part of moving the art to the galleries. It has to be packed, every single piece, and we commit this to the artist. It has to be unpacked and then repacked. So there's going to be the labor cost that's in there, which does not go to staff, but obviously would go to the people that we would contract with. And I'm sure you're taking that in consideration, but I just wanted to double check on that. And the other thing, when you mentioned about grants, I've spoken with all of the people who receive our grant applications in the state, and they said that one of the things that we're missing unlike, and I'll just throw this out as what they said, unlike Fargo, is that there is a relationship with the city government, the supporting aspects of our program, and they're looking for that when it comes to grant money. So we feel like that not only will the grants happen, and that's not something that I can speak to 100%, but I can speak to 100% that the private sector says they will step up. So, for instance, just to get here tonight, Hal Gershman gave me a large donation. And I just think that's important to recognize him because he did it on purpose. He gave $2,500 just as a sponsorship, just to show that he believes in what we're doing. And he says, many more to come. Just let me know how it goes with the city and, and the questions that you have and which are honorable. And then at the same time, I'd like to look to see that to inspire grants. So I think you're definitely on the right track of, the direction we want to go. But, it's going to, I think, be a big help, when we prove some of the things you'd like for us to prove to you, for the city to be able to move forward with this. Thank you.
So, Mr. Weigel?
Maybe I've been living under a rock or a rose lately, so I may not know about if there's any bad blood between arts organizations. I don't really get into that. But when I looked up the message of PAC, or Public Arts Commission, it says the mission of the Public Arts Commission is to create a more vibrant cultural life for all who live or visit Grand Forks. And to me, I think that's what we're deciding tonight. Are we looking at providing funding to an organization that is interested in creating a more vibrant cultural life for all who live or visit Grand Forks? That's what I think we're voting on tonight. And so that's what I'm wondering about. I think the city supports local artists. I don't think I voted in favor of it at that time, but the Pillars downtown, that's a local artist to the tune of what? $400,000. So I think the city does support local. I don't always think that local art is public art, but I do think that many times our public art does come from local artists, and I think that's you look downtown, that's what we see is $400,000 invested in public artists or local artists. So I think we're maybe reading too much into this. I'm certainly in favor of it and in favor of creating a more vibrant cultural life for those who live in Grand Forks.
Mr. Cozart, I'm going to take a different direction. Finances and utilizing public finances to help an organization like yours comes with an inherent amount of risk for the policymakers that are trusting you with the public funds. How are you managing your funds? And to go to Ms. Dockler's question earlier, what capability will you have to provide reporting to the city council so that we can ensure that the money is in good standing and you're doing as you say you will with the funds?
Thank you, President Sandy. That's a great question. And City Council, I want to address that we have asked I asked as soon as I came in the position, I want to say on board, as soon as I came in the position, I asked for a fiduciary report, and I felt like when we talked to the board that the best person on our board was Sally Miscavige, and so I've turned all of the finance management over to her as a board member, which is within Robert's rule to do, and so it is all completely, to the point that if we need to show you something on Monday, we can. Maybe last Monday we couldn't, but now everything is completely in order because of Miscavige.
And what qualifications does she have to do that work?
She's a CPA.
Thank you. That's good to know. I, for one, I'm recognizing different points of view tonight, and I think it's great. And I feel like a few of you have been playing devil's advocates because perhaps you felt like you've been burned in the past, or the organizations that you represent have been burned, and I get that. I do. I think that there has been some difficulty between some of the arts organizations, but we under the time that I've been here, watched an arts organization that was managed by people associated to the arts completely dismantle and fall apart because they couldn't manage their resources. And nothing personal to artists not being financial managers. They're good at being artists, and that's why they're good at what they do. I think having an organization like PAC and codifying and saying today, as Mr. Weigel has mentioned, saying today that the Public Arts Commission is going to be the City of Grand Forks' arm for public art. I think that's good for us, and I think it's good for the local artists. And I, for one, am not afraid that there aren't artists. The board isn't made up of a bunch of artists, because we had that and it failed miserably. And I certainly don't want to cast any dispersions on the people of the past, because I know that they were doing everything that they thought was right and just. But having a group like this that brings private dollars and brings the art purchasers forward, the people that will ultimately be buying the art from the local artists, I think that although the money isn't directly going to our necessarily specific local artists, I think the local artists are the ones that will eventually reap the massive benefits of the funding that we would provide to the Public Arts Commission. I think having a privately funded organization that is willing to manage the financial resources that they're provided and report to us at whatever interval that we would like, I think is good for, I believe it's good for the local artists. Yes, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, President Sandy. First of all, there's a synergy, a collaborative nature between public art and private collectors. But what we're talking about here tonight is public art. So first of all, the asks are pretty vague for me. I'm hoping we can be more specific. I'll try to be specific in my asks. The Grand Vision Convergence, the 2016 plan, where would I find that on the city website, or could that be sent out to council members so we can see what we'd agreed to? Because part of what's being said tonight is that this is consistent with that, so I'd like to just be able to take a look at that.
I have it on my phone.
I believe, actually, I believe the URL was in one of the many staff reports.
Is there a web link for it in the staff report? Okay.
I think it was page 47, or it was buried in there, but it's there.
Nice, thanks. You're a hardworking council member, President Sandy. I say that all the time. The second thing, Art of Fitness, is the Park District, do they have any involvement in this? Yeah? That's great.
Yes, so my discussing this with you guys was just showing that we are also, as a park district, trying to work with PAC and figure out ways that we can bring art into public facilities and outdoors. So we're not necessarily asking anything from the city, we're just saying how we are a public entity that is working with these private, or these nonprofit art groups.
Great. The combination of adult playgrounds, which is what this is, and public art is fantastic. So, and having the Park District involved would be wonderful. The 60,000 for 2022 and beyond, we've generally asked organizations to become independent. Mr. Phelan, you're fond of saying the city seeds and private feeds. Is there any intention, or is the intention here that this be in perpetuity?
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Weber, I think yes, to some degree, similar to what we say with the EDC, right? Or downtown development. We hope it continues to move forward, and without the public sector, some things will not sustain the momentum that we have currently on. I just want to mention, like, for example, the 25,000 for the art galleries, that's for 22. We've kind of discussed that, and we can talk about more details. The 35,000 again is an up to number. So if there are no projects in 22 for public art that we'd want to participate in, we're not going to spend the money. So just so you folks know that. So really, this is incentivizing them. Hey, we have some public investment funding available to us. How do we get projects moving forward. And so without specific approved maintenance on existing public art pieces that we want to do, or without new projects, we're not likely going to spend up to that $35,000. And that's how we've accumulated. If you look at 2163 in beautification, we've accumulated over $1 million in that fund that we're going to target. We propose to target the public event space in the Beacon project, okay? The reason why we've accumulated so much cash balance in that is because we haven't had projects to move forward with. And so, again, if we don't have projects, they're not moving forward. Number one, probably shame on us, we're missing out on economic development opportunities. So this is really to inspire them to move forward with projects, because we've set aside funding for you to make things happen. That we have to report to City Council on what we're partnering on.
I'm seeing a one-page spreadsheet, a 2 or 3 page staff report, and the PowerPoint. What am I missing that included page 47 with the URL for the...
Mr. Weber, I believe it's on, not the PowerPoint regarding it's the document itself, I think has a URL in it. So if you look on page 1 of the partnership and support request, you'll see the master plan. Click on the following link.
Okay, very good. I'll look some more, and if I'm still having trouble, I'll come back. I'm ready to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Veen?
Mr. Phelan, you talked about the action plan, work plan. When do you think we would see that? At what point?
Council President Sandy and Council Member Vian, I think for the 22 items that we want to move forward, you're going to have that before the end of the year in 21, working with Jill and I with the Park District, with the PAC board, you'll have that plan. I think regarding the one-time ask of the art collection registry and the city vibrancy campaign, I would likely be back here with that particular plan again by the end of the year, because we want to get that going in 21 in both those areas. So we'd have a more, we'd have a quarterly report. If you're going to ask for quarterly reports, we'd be here on number one on a plan for 22, and on that one-time ask, I'd be back here with what that report looks like.
I think, I talked about the public-private partnership. What's the budget look like? What's public, what's private? How does that all come together? And what's the action plan that would support that? That seems like it's all part of really the business plan for moving forward. And you've got to have put that together to come up with these numbers, is what I'm saying. Could we get some idea of what that looks like?
Yeah. Council President Sandy and council members and Council Member Vian, I think if you would approve this plan next week, Monday, I would work with Mr. Gosted and this team to put together the agreement. And in the meantime, I'd come back with a more specific action plan, knowing that we have funds set aside that are approved, that an agreement's going to be set aside on how to do that, and then I would come back thereafter with the specific plan.
So are you asking maybe that we give you tentative approval, and then we would actually have an agreement we would sign for final approval?
Council President Sander and Council Member Vian, what I'm really asking for is that you'd approve it. The paradigm that we have in front of you, you would allow me to work with, as part of that, subject to a final review and approval and agreement, I'd work with Mr. Gosted on that, so I'd like to have that approved. But once I have that all approved, what I'd likely bring back as an informational item, not only a report on what we've done to date, but also have you take a look at what that agreement looks like. So I'd rather have you approve it in concept, but if you certainly want me to bring back the final agreement, I can, but I prefer you to approve it subject to city attorney putting the agreement together as enunciated here. And again, I'm not going anywhere, because within 3 months I got to be back here reporting back on all these sorts of things. And so that's what you're approving, and you're approving coming back with all the detailed reports.
So if we approved it subject to getting the agreement, also between now and then we might be able to get some of the additional information too.
Yep. On Monday I'll work with PAC, and I'll have more specifics. And then I also have committed to you that we'll work on the agreement, because it'll be subject to that final agreement. And then I also will commit to you that we'll come up with a detailed action plan by the end of the year that will detail all this out. And I think the reason why I'm asking that is because then that's earnest support from the council to move forward with that. And then our time will be really well spent over the next couple of months to come back with a final plan in '22.
One other thing that's a little bit off subject, but the Public Arts Master Plan from 2016, I would like that to be reviewed again. It seems to me like there might be a time when that would evolve or need to be updated for how things are going. So I just throw that out, not as a part of this motion, but that be considered.
Okay, I think we can analysis paralysis this to death. I think in general, we as a council either have to trust somebody to be responsible for our public art or not. And I for one, think that public art is great for our community. And I don't know what, if not this group, who? There is no one. So we can either move this forward, dedicate the resources and help our artists or not. And to me, it's pretty simple. And I for one believe that public art is important for our community. We have lots of it. We don't take care of it. We desperately need somebody to start doing something about it. And we have a group that are self-funding their own management, their own people, and are willing to take on that role if we're willing to help give them some resources to do it. I think it's a good idea myself, yes.
Council President, I think that's a really good point. I think we have such great things going on in our community, and I think if you look at areas we've fallen behind that we're really working on, indoor turf facilities, indoor court facilities, event kind of spaces that we're making progress on that we've fallen behind. I think even in public art, this community was probably more well known as more of a public art community. A lot of cities have really raised their bar, and this is an attempt to really kind of ignite us and get us going. The other thing I talked with the Public Art Commission is let's just do this in 21 and 22, and let's take a big step forward. But this isn't, and then let's report back and really gain some confidence in what we're doing, so that you can review it, and then hopefully we have huge success to say, hey, let's elongate this agreement. And that was why it was a short period of time. Let's earn some trust.
Yeah, I think in just trying to provide a little bit of perspective, I think Mr. Hoover and perhaps Ms. Richards or Mr. Brooks could also go back in time. How many different projects did Mr. Hoover stand right there asking us to support? And every time he brought forward a public arts project, one or the other arts group they threw their hands in the air, papers went flying, everybody got angry, and after another 3 meetings, we went nowhere. We kept going nowhere because our arts organizations do not play nice with one another. They just plain don't. And so unless we have a group that's independent of that all those organizations, I think we continue to stagnate. I think that's bad for our community. We'll continue to put money into the local arts. And again, in my opinion, an organization that's independent from some of the politics of the local arts organizations, I believe makes it easier for them to actually move some of these ideas forward. And I don't mean to insult the arts organizations, because they're all very good people working very hard, trying to promote what they do. They do. I'm a big fan of them. Yes, Ms. Dockler.
I think it's a strong statement to say that we don't take care of our public art that already exists. I think, have you talked into the community development department to find out what they currently do?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No, I just observe our public art. I look around.
I would be more comfortable, because I don't want to belabor this point anymore, I would be more comfortable voting on it as 2 separate things.
Certainly, I believe if Mr. Weber and Mr. Weigel are willing to amend their motions, so Mr. Weber, perhaps we should rescind your motion and start over. Would you rescind your motion, Mr. Weigel? Are you okay with that? Certainly, okay.
I'll move approval of the special project fund for the $50,000, a combination of $15,000 for the registry and $35,000 for the vibrancy campaign.
Great. Is there a second? Second by Weigel. Any other comments on that? I have one last comment. Mr. Phelan, unfortunately, the mayor had to leave. Is the mayor on record supporting this? I haven't heard the mayor actually say, I think this is a good idea, and I think it's very important, if he does support this, to say it publicly.
Good. City Council President Sandy, I'm here on behalf of the city administration, and Mayor Paczynski was supportive of bringing this request forward to you.
Very good. I will expect that he will reiterate that on Monday night. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion related to the annual services?
I'll move.
Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Mr. Veen, do you have a comment?
Well, I have a question on the motion. Is it just for 1 year, or are you talking about, it says 2022 and beyond?
The city administration's asking just for 22.
That would be my motion.
The motion is to support the one-time annual service fee. Mr. Weber, do you second? Is that what you do? Second that? Great. Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Dockler dissents. Thank you for the very good conversation. Thank you, Mr. Phelan.
Thank you.
Item 210, Lions Auto Development Agreement. Mr. Phelan.
John, okay, thank you for putting that the map up on the screen. So I'm really excited. We have John Miscavige here on behalf of Northridge, the developer in this case. So wanted to go over this particular map that kind of spells out a lot of the things that we're trying to do as part of this development. Lions Auto Development, as you recall, was approved in February along with 3 other projects for a total of 4. And you, the City Council and all the other local taxing entities approved this development as a 20-year, 100% pilot. And so similar to what we've done with the Beacon project and also with Block 5 or St. John's, now we're coming back with the development agreement. And as we've talked about this project before, this one has some nuance to it, so we want to go through it. Number 3 on the map is the Lions development. As you look at the particular map, number 4 is the Grand Forks Herald lot. And so Mr. Miscavige has really got a terrific development, and I have some concept drawings, and he'll come up here himself to talk about his development himself. So really, the goal of the city is to take that whole block and turn it into this mixed-use project, a 6-story building, first floor that will have a lot of engaged shops, whether they're professional, boutique, bar, restaurant that will really engage. It will have a courtyard. And so, but really to make all that happen with the 6-story building is they really need that Grand Forks Herald lot. And so that really maximizes the investment in this property, and that's in all of our best interests 20 years from now that we've built a project of a scale to do that. So that's our number 1 of wanting to partner on this Grand Forks Herald lot. One of the things that we've worked with Mr. Miscavige is as he's looked at the design of his building, and he's looking at building underground parking, is that he'll have underground parking, but generally just for the building itself. And the way he wants to construct this building, he will not have parking to replace the parking spots of the Grand Forks Herald. And so that really got us thinking, okay, number 1, we need to swap somehow, whether it's a cash swap or looking at an alternative lot. We looked at, working with Mr. Miscavige, we looked at number 5, which is on that map, which is a lot that is owned by Mr. Miscavige. So the first nuance of this building is let's work with him on that Grand Forks Herald lot so he can build a development that is really worth our while and will be this 50 to 100-year structure that we want. What we did is Mr. Miscavige offered the lot is noted number 5, and that's across from our police department. We asked the Red River Land Company, who we worked with on the development, recent development, hey, take a look at what the comparable value. And so there's analysis in attached to your staff report that plus or minus, it's probably a better deal for the city to swap this lot. It's a larger lot. It's right next to city right-of-way, which is number 6. And so we're getting a larger lot. We're able to combine that lot with city right-of-way and to create a larger lot. So we think this makes a lot of sense. I did ask the assessing department, Ms. Lazur and Mr. Hodak, and they generally do agree that the Harold lot and the Miscavige lot are a plus or minus of equal value. So I think we've got that handled, and I think the Miscavige lot makes sense because we can combine it with some city right-of-way and really make things happen. There's been some interest in that lot. Over the years, we've had low and moderate income housing folks that have been interested in developing that property. We know the county is a bit landlocked, and they've been interested in that lot for future development. So there has been some significant interest, and I think if we come back and plat that as one lot, it's even going to be a more valuable piece of property. The other thing we looked at is lots 1 and 2, and that'll be the next agenda item, but this really got us thinking. We're going to fill that whole block up with Lions development. We really ought to, probably 10, 15 years ago when the city purchased that property and then also built that, we should have taken the whole lot at that point, but we didn't, okay? So not to make a mistake, not sitting here for the next 20 years, let's make a move. And so incorporating 1 and 2 really completes that block. It does 2 things. It expands our property interest in the whole entire block, so we can build that on that lot. It also, Mr. Miscavige, I think, is going to need some parking in that lot too, because he's going to be under parked, so it's going to drive revenue if we have a surface parking lot. The other thing we've worked on is, even when Governor Burgum was here, he said that'd be a great location for a mixed-use parking structure. It's on the edge of your downtown, fill in the inner core. So I think it's a transitory thing where in the future, we can look at not only having parking there, but look at a mixed-use structure, whether that's housing or retail or what have you. So I think it's really in our long-term interest to do that. The other thing that's going to come up on the development agreement is Mr. Miscavige has agreed as part of this agreement to also work on doing any demo and site restoration of lots 1 and 2 as part of that development agreement. So we've talked about whether there be a cash balance. Mr. Miscavige has moved forward to say we'll work to, as part of when we demo the Lions property, that we agree to this. So that's in the particular agreement. The other major thing is on this alley, and you can see in the alley back. And again, not to give Governor Burgum all the credit, but he deserves a lot of the credit in this respect of let's create an alley that is really a demonstration lot. And when Governor Burgum was here, I don't know, a few years ago, he talked about down on Kitson in between 3rd and 4th as that lot, or that alley to redo. But this is actually a better property and a better alley to do it because there's less properties. Because if you look at, as we go further south, there's a whole lot of properties and it'd be really hard to reconstruct alleys and bury lines. So the other really main part of this alley is to working with the developer, the adjacent property owners, Xcel Energy, and to see of how do we make that happen. That's going to be part of the development agreement too, and Mr. Gossett will talk further about that, but that'll be a side agreement on this thing. So I think if you look at what the city of Fargo has done in their downtown, they have front face some of their alleys. So if you look at Roberts Alley and some other alleys, they've done some remarkable things that are really cool that we can do in this location. If you look at behind the Student Union on campus of UND, they've suddenly turned from a loading ramp with a bad sidewalk, they've turned it into a tremendous walkway. That's, I think, the beginning of what we're trying to do on this particular alley. And then the other strategic part is our Grand Forks Herald, our new tech accelerator, can continue that going further down in that particular plat. So really, that's the development we would like to move forward with. Also, I've attached on your staff report a concept of how we'd bury the underground lines. And so I won't go over, maybe bring that one up quick, John, if you could bring that one up next. So this is the alley, and I spoke of how we're going to bury. And so you can see even with the Schneider lot where, you know, we'll have different transformers. We're going to be burying the line. We're going to be coordinating all the various utilities to make that happen. We're going to repave the alley as part of this redevelopment and hopefully make it really neat and not just something where you back up a garbage truck into. And so that's what the plan is right now. We're going to have to work out the particulars with the developer and Xcel Energy, but you can see even the properties, if you look at the Schott property and the Schneider, that's going to play into where we need to put infrastructure from an electrical point of view, and it has lots of benefits as we move forward. Now with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Miscavige, since he's been here quite a while, we have some concept drawings, but put in his own words what he'd like to do. And John, maybe want to just draw up his concepts, and and then after that, we'd follow up with any questions.
Mr. Miscavige, good evening.
Council President, thanks for having me. Can you pull that up there for me? I don't know how this deal works.
John, is there any way to pull it up front here?
Is this a laser?
Yeah, that's laser.
Yeah, all right. Can you go to the front LOA, next page maybe? Well, here's a great slide. So what we did, our initial concept was a zero lot line construction. So our storefront would have came right to the property line at the face of the street. And when we engaged this architect out of Bozeman, they had showed us a rendering of what they had done in another project and encouraged us to get rid of the main floor parking because it ultimately was driving the compression to the out of the building. And so we pulled the building back and kind of created this great, almost like a park-like setting. And so if you go to the land in front of the Herald, these we've reserved as for restaurant spaces. And our intention really is to kind of have outdoor patio similar to like the Blue Moose, or if you've been to Lincoln, Nebraska, it would be like their Haymarket. A lot of those restaurants kind of sit right in the street. Can we go to the next slide? That's about 93 stalls of underground parking. Not the one I'm looking for. Next one. So this kind of showcases what our main floor would look like from a commercial space. There's roughly about, I want to say somewhere to the tune of 20,000 square feet on main floor of commercial. And so here we're really kind of seeking a professional business tenant, professional services. These will be much smaller boutique shops. Those don't represent right of what it actually is. So those spaces we'd be looking for about 500 square feet per shop. Really would be focusing on pizza by the slice, more boutique vendors that would bring, just call it local culinary experiences to the downtown, being that we do have Central High School across the street. We think that they'd fare well with both the nightlife downtown and then also the students across the street. So I think we could get different things there. And then those restaurants would both utilize the outdoor patio space out front. And then inside here is kind of like a reverse, almost like a mini mall where there would be a courtyard inside as well. This, we're really looking for an anchor restaurant tenant that would then have the same outdoor patios out there. And, I think all of these need to really fit a niche of what we're after as far as what the tenant profile would kind of play off one another. This back, we've talked to a couple of breweries that we're looking at. And again, they would have outdoor patios and then kind of bring this back alley to life. So we're pretty excited about how a lot of this space functions. There's a lot of work that needs to be done and kind of making it flow right and then finding the right tenants that fit each one of the niche spaces. So I really think that the concept of removing the parking from there really brings a lot more traffic to the downtown and livens up that development. Next slide. That's a split podium. We got rid of that. Go ahead to the next one. I wish I had these. This would be our residential living on top of the podium, which would be about 22 feet in the air. And this will continue on for 5 stories. So we're looking to raise our apartment unit level from about 93 to probably about 110 to 115 is what we're shooting for. Given the current inflation costs of building materials, we need to try drive more density to the building site. So that's currently what we're working on. And if you can get, you want to thumb through a few of these. Next one. Yep. So this is will be the 6th story. We'll relocate our office up into that corner, so that would overlook downtown. And then we've kind of got a nice little amenity space out here for the tenants on 6th floor. And then we would have another amenity space at the 22-foot mark above the kind of the boutique shop. So we're really trying to build something amazing, and you know, we've got a lot of work to do in this design. But step number 1 was more or less working through the development agreement with the city before we really start spending a lot of money on architecture. So, any questions?
Any questions about the project?
Yeah.
Mr. Weber?
My understanding of what you were originally conceiving was more like a Roberts Commons with the wraparound around parking. Now all of the parking is going to be underground, and that's the only parking you're going to have.
Correct. Yep.
Any other questions?
We felt that it really activated the retail component to where each sector could play off each other. And with having we were only getting about 50 some parking stalls, I believe, on that. It really was just, it was compressing the development and really making everything very boxy. So rather than being able to depress the building within the site footprint, we were having to force everything to the outer perimeter. So you'd basically be standing in the streets and staring up at a pretty straight wall 6 stories into the air. So I think it allows, you know, it allows for a much more better architectural experience as well. So.
Great.
The burying of the infrastructure in the back, is that, who, Excel's going to pay for that? The city's going to pay for that? Who's paying for that?
Pretty convoluted deal between us, the city, and Excel Energy and Mid-Continent, so.
Council President Sandy, Council Member Weber, that will come in. We're working with, we got a design now at least with, or at least a conceptual design with Excel Energy, and like most other entities, nobody's going to want to be the first in on investing. So I think really the city's role as part of that is that's an older alley, is probably the paving of the alley. And I think number 2 is probably doing the project coordination, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts with all the different utilities. That will all come out in the agreement, but we certainly we need Excel Energy to be a participant, and we also need them to be a financial contributor to that. And that's to be determined, and certainly the city will be a part of that because it is the city's alley, and we're part of reconstructing pavement. So that'll be mainly our role as well as project coordination.
Mr. Bean?
Yeah, Mr. Phelan, I know a couple years ago when I was on the tour with the governor, he really highly recommended that we do something about all of our electrical in these alleys. And that hasn't changed since then. I don't know if there would have ever been any funds through ARPA, money through ARPA or something else. It's a little bit late for that, but it would be extremely beneficial to not only make this alley maybe an example, but that we look at continuing that throughout the whole downtown through whatever means. And I don't know if there's any avenues to put pressure on Excel to do some of that, but is there any thought or discussions internally about that becoming a standard?
Yeah, Council President Sandy and Council Member Vian, we've had conversations with Tony Grinberger, who's the new Dakota area manager, and so I think they're open-minded. Certainly the governor has said you're going to have to really pressure Excel Energy to want them to bring them to the table. But I think this is an alley that thankfully we have a private developer. We don't have that many property owners. We can get this done, so try to create a roadmap so that we can do other alleys. And I think if you look at the Herald alley with the condos, with the federal building, that's another alley we can get accomplished because there's only a handful of owners. But we're trying to pave a path and get an agreement together working with Mr. Gosted so that we can now duplicate that in other alleys.
Is the electrical going to be underground there? No?
Yes, everything. And so really what we've heard, and Mr. Grasser's been working hard with his team, is that all the underground utilities are going to follow XL Energy. So XL Energy is the leader. So when XL puts their conduit in, Midco and everybody else is going to follow them. And so that's why we really need XL to be all in on this, because all the other utilities are going to follow them.
Yeah, you'll have a conduit system or some type of system underground where we would be able to run all that.
Yes.
And that'll all be done with the construction project, correct? Yeah.
And we should mention, Mr. Miscavige wants to get going next March, and so we're trying to get all these agreements underway so that he can final design, start bidding and constructing this building next
So
spring.
you want us to set the date, the public hearing date, correct?
We're asking, we do have to do a public hearing, so we are asking for that December date in City Council to review the final agreement and also take public input.
I'll move approval, but I have another question if there's a second.
Second by Weigel. Yes, Mr. Weber?
You don't need us designing your building or anything, but over 110 units, waste management. We're talking about activating this alleyway, and yet 110 apartment units and all these businesses create a lot of waste. Can you talk to us about?
Can we go back to that main floor slide? Back, right there. So we've left both parking and refuge area on this end. The exact size of those, I think we have a lot of, we have a lot of fluidity to how much space that we do put back there for all of the retail tenants and the residential tenants. Residential tenants will be utilizing trash chutes that will convey garbage downwards. But I think we've got a lot to learn from how they're handling it at Roberts Commons. And I think both conversations with us and Public Works to understand how those pickups work. They're going to probably be more daily pickups just because you're going to have smaller trash containers and more frequent pickups and a lot of waste that's going to be generated from, the retail tenants. So I don't have a great answer for you on it, but yet it is on our radar. So we've earmarked space.
Very good, thanks.
Yep.
Good question. Yes, Mr. Bean.
So, I love what you're planning. I think all of that is great. One of the fallouts is going to be parking. You're going to only get so much parking underground. We're going to take away the parking that's currently available for the Herald. Where are we going to, in the end, replace and have parking available for not only what we're taking away, but for the new that can't park in the lower level?
So, with the 93 stalls underground in discussions when Mr. Burgum was in town, I think that parking lot, as he alluded, is a great opportunity for us to basically create a leaseback agreement from the city in the after hours where our tenants, it's basically putting asset utilization front and forward by you guys utilizing it from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and our tenants then would overfill into those spaces, from like a 6 p.m. to a 7 a.m. And so I believe they're doing various parking sharing within that Roberts Commons. So I think we could get more facts as to how that's actually working for them.
I think but having the city purchase those two properties does provide an interesting opportunity for our community to not only do the potentially multi-use building with a few levels of parking, but that actually allows us to expand our downtown and sets the stage for actually growing our downtown in those areas. So hopefully, whether it's a TIF or anything else, an incentive to get Mr. Miscavige or anyone else to come forward and say that they want to buy that property and start building another building. We just got to get this one done and keep moving.
Ultimately, though, I think we're going to need to have a bigger discussion on parking.
Certainly.
Really do. I think you can only keep growing like this, which is great. I love it.
As I say, I think that's a good problem.
Yeah, but we're going to have to figure that one out. I don't think that's inevitable for me.
Yeah.
And Ken, I don't think there's an easy answer when it comes to parking. I mean, everything you read on the growing trend is less and less parking on everything. And so, I mean, I'm probably the exact opposite. I'm a fan of, you know, what Brett would say is a sea of parking. Because when you do have a parking problem, it's not fun. But, you know, there's more applications and more technology that I think is evolving how people commute. And so, you know, eventually, you know, we could be left with a lot of apartments and a lot of empty parking lots. So, yeah, who knows?
So there's a motion and a second. Any other thoughts? Okay, we did good. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Miscavige.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Item 211, the downtown property purchase agreements approval as noted in the previous item. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy and Committee of the Whole members. Again, we alluded to these two lots. I think they're a strategic opportunity for us to purchase these particular lots. As noted on your staff report, there's a purchase agreement with the Schneiders for $250,000, and there's a purchase agreement with Mr. Schott for $372,000. They're both 7,000 square foot lots. We arrived at the price for Mr. Or the Schneiders at $35.71 a square foot. Mr. Schott's at $53.14 a square foot. And one of the major reasons as we worked with Mr. Schott is that he was in the process of renovating that particular structure. We probably should have gotten to this building, I don't know, probably, if not 5 years ago, at least 3 years ago. And so he's in the midst of construction. So what we did as part of this, we did review what he had for hard costs into this, you know, above and beyond. And so when you look at those hard costs, and he's got a letter that's submitted, to be fair to Mr. Schott, you know, if you just, I was just looking through the hard costs, it's about almost $130,000. So if you look at what we're offering the Schneiders, that additional increment is really to reimburse him above and beyond what we think that market value of that property is, to reimburse him for all those costs because he is in the midst of construction. So those are the big differences in when we negotiated in this case. And if you look at what Mr. Miscavige and has purchased some of the Lions property in the Schneider in and around there, whether it's the $35 or the $53 a square foot, it's all in line with what has had to happen to purchase the Lions and Schneider block in those parcels. So we think we're in win range. They are different, but there are reasons why we're having differences as part of moving forward with this particular project. So with that, Mr. Gostet, thanks for all your work on this as part of the purchase agreement. That's what's in front of you tonight.
Any comments? Mr. Weigel moves approval. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3, information only. 3.1, Mr. Dulitz added and Ms. Lundmark added a COVID update later on this afternoon, so there are items on the agenda for review. Item 4, adjourn. Motion by Weigel, second by Dockler. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.